just like not having to be doing anything unless like I wanted to. So that was really nice. What about you?
It's a basketball game.
Lots of basketball.
Still going.
The extended essay. Yeah, that's actually funny because I'm on the subject. I was just reading over. I'm gonna do a geography.
all set?
That's talking
Okay.
about.
So we called the meeting to order earlier, and we had an executive session, but we shall continue now with the remainder of the regular meeting. Welcome to MSAD 51 Board of Directors meeting for April 24th, 2023. And we have everybody here. Jared is just out of the room right now. So we will continue to number 3, recognition. So we have Kate and Bobby here. Please.
So hi everyone. Just wanted to introduce Bobby Goodwin and Kate Wilson-Petrowski. They are our Anti-Defamation League advisors, among other things. And they're going to talk a little bit about what that programming looks like at the middle school and speak on behalf of our students.
Hi everyone, I'm Bobby Goodwin.
And I'm Kate Olson-Petrowski.
So we are the co-advisors of the Anti-Defamation League's peer trainer program at the middle school. And it's the ADL for short. The ADL is a leading anti-hate organization. And the ADL developed a program called the World of Difference Peer Training Program. And it's the curriculum that we use at our school. This curriculum builds bridges of communication, understanding, and respect among diverse groups of people. Why is it that when you get a microphone, your voice starts to shake? Sorry about that. Disregard the shake. So in our school, this peer training program teaches 20 to 30 student leaders at GMS to understand and challenge bias and bullying. There's a short application process for 7th and 8th grade students to apply for this opportunity. And these peer leaders, once selected, attend a 3-day training led by ADL facilitators. And during this training, student leaders develop student leadership, critical thinking, and conflict management skills. They learn about and how to address explicit and implicit forms of bias and their manifestations and impact. And they foster positive peer influence to promote greater social responsibility and a more inclusive and respectful school community. After their training, they are primed and ready to teach lessons in the 6th grade health classes on some of the things that they have learned. And these lessons are fun, and they include interactive activities that help students connect. And our peer leaders become role models for our whole community.
We wanted to share some reflections from some of our amazing ADL peer leaders in their own words. To me, ADL is a chance for people to learn and educate others on how to be an upstander. ADL is very important to our school. The ADL training helped me learn other people's perspectives and learn more about myself in the process. I got to make great new friends who I stayed in touch with after the training. It helped me learn how to teach better and use more productive ways in getting my point across. I know what you mean about the shaky. Teaching 6th graders has helped me build my confidence and work better with other people. It was a really great opportunity. A bunch of my friends did the training the year before, and I saw how happy they were teaching and learning about ADL, so I wanted to do it too. I'm so glad I did. I think that it's a really amazing thing to have a program for something you believe in and that you get to share what you believe in with others.
That's it. Are there any questions?
All of our voices get shaky in front of this way. It's not you.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Actually, can someone remind us, is ADL going to be coming to the high school? ADL training?
We're still in discussions with
Okay.
with the ADL program around the high school, but yes, that is a place marker in the high school budget. Yep.
And do you know, in districts where there is ADL in both the middle school and the high school, do those middle schoolers, do they continue on in high school? Does it, like,
I think
are you
so.
familiar with that at all?
I think they do. I mean, once they're trained, they may need to be shored up a little bit and, you know, touch base with the advisors. But yeah, once trained, they're trained to carry on.
And is that something that you would like to see, that it happens at the high school? I mean,
Yeah.
you're very much in favor of that. I
Yeah.
presume. Okay, thanks.
And some of the children, too, we talked to said, oh, yeah, we want to do it in the high school. So, yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you. I'm sure my 8th grader, who's a trainer, has been one of those students who wants to continue on. I know it's been a great experience and has, I think, trained other kids, 6th graders who may be on this board. So thank you.
He's a great teacher.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. Okay. Moving on to number 4, approval of minutes. Is there any objection if we take these as a group?
No.
Okay, I do have one edit, Jeff, on the April 12th joint meeting at the end. I just adjourned the meeting. We didn't take a vote, so need to update that.
The April 12th meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other than that, is there a motion?
Well, I have a question. Does that affect anyone who might need to abstain who are absent to vote for them altogether?
You're voting on the accuracy of them, I guess. So if you want to abstain or if you want to take them separately, we can. Would you like to take them separately?
I have no preference, but I didn't know for anyone who may have missed any of them.
Cool. Do I hear a motion? One way or another?
I move to approve the minutes of all 3 together.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Kim. Further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? All abstaining? Mike's abstaining. Very good. Okay, moving on to public comment number 5. Is there people that would like to speak? Step up, introduce yourself. Share? Nope. Okay. Seeing none, I'll close public comment and we will move on to presentations. Number 6, we have School Library Month going on and we have Heather Perkins here. Please.
It should have said Heather Perkinson, I'm sorry.
I thought there was something
On
missing
the
there.
agenda, it says Heather Perkins.
Yes, you have to use the microphone. Everybody's voice has to shake. Let's not project that. I'm gonna find the tab. So I'm Heather Perkinson, and I'm joined tonight by the GMS librarian and the MIW librarian, Dorothy Hall-Riddle and Maureen Driscoll. And let me see if I can project. Thank you for your patience. Looking for Geiger.
While you're pulling that up, maybe this is a nice time for us to thank all of you, given that it's School Library Month. So can we just take a second and thank you all for your very hard work. So.
There it is. How does it look? Okay. All right. So just it is School Library Month, so we thought we would join you tonight and just brag a little bit about the fabulous libraries in MSAD 51. And click there. There we go. Introducing ourselves again. So I have been in libraries for about, I think I figured out 15 years, and teaching much longer than that. I won't do the math on that. And I have a master's in education and a master's in library and information science. And Dorothy?
I started in my first middle school library in 2000. I've only ever worked in middle schools. I don't know how these guys do it. My husband, a high school teacher, says he doesn't know how I do it either, but I have a master's in library and information science from the University of South Carolina. Go Gamecocks.
I'm afraid of this microphone. So, is it working? It's working. Okay, good. I actually started as a high school English teacher. My first degree is secondary English, ELA, and life just said, and ended up becoming a librarian. I got my master's degree at Syracuse University, National Board Certified. I've done teaching English as a foreign language through Ireland, where I have dual citizenship. And I don't want to say how long I've been teaching, because it's longer than both of them, but it's like 28 years. I did the math. So I've been teaching a while. And I've taught K to 8, so kind of had everybody. And there's no favorite. They're all, like, each grade is amazing in a different way. Oh, yeah. So here are quick pictures. The picture from me is some of our first graders reading in what we call our gallery. Over in the pillow section in the library, we have comfy pillows, and we put up student artwork there. So that's why we call it our gallery.
My picture is one of our days during our lessons before vacation. April is also Poetry Month. And we did several weeks of rotations throughout the library to different stations, focusing on different elements of that.
And those are 3 high schoolers participating in the African American Literature Read-In, and they are watching a poet read their poem, and then they're going to read some other poems and discuss them.
So some of the things that we included, we wanted to give you just a kind of a picture of a day in the life of what it's like here in our school system with our kids. So my first page here at MIW shows some kids just reading, enjoying reading. That upper left picture is a couple 3rd grade girls, and the middle picture on the top row is some 4th graders who are doing some research to get ready for a picture writing collaborative project that we do with the art teacher and the classroom teacher and research in the library. The photo over on the right actually is similar, or the same one as one at the beginning. Down at the bottom, that shows some 3rd graders. I teach technology classes with 3rd grade. They alternate. 1 week we teach technology, 1 week we teach library, or I do that. And oftentimes technology is taught in the classroom. So we're up there in Mrs. Hughes's classroom, and they were using databases that we get through the Maine, the state of Maine library, and also using some interactive books. And I brought one if anyone wants to look through it after. It's really neat because they're like ebooks with supplemental information. The picture on the right is like a follow-up to that as well, like more close. You can see the girl there, a Sounds of Silence kiddo working there. Then the middle bottom picture shows just some 1st graders working on a puzzle, and down on the bottom you can see a couple kids just reading together, which is what is always nice. One of the things that I love to share with folks about the library is that I think of the library as being kind of like Switzerland. It is the place where no matter what, the kids are always safe, always welcome, always at home. It's the one place at school that's academic where they are not assessed. So it's nice that they can just come and can just be. Then the next, oh, I went the wrong way, Heather. Oh my gosh, whoopsie. The next picture has some celebrities. The top left-hand corner is when we had our chickadee voting in the state of Maine. Kids in grades K through 4th grade read 10 different books with their teachers. that are nominated for this Chickadee Award, and they're books that have been picked by a group of librarians and teachers, and they vote on them. So the town of Cumberland is nice enough to send over the actual voting booths. And this is great, because that's a kindergartner crawling out, and you can see the feet, because they're so, the little shelf is so high that the kids have to scooch up on a chair to vote. So that's why I love seeing the feet sticking out. In the middle there, that's 2 3rd graders, I think in Mrs. Russell's class, where we did a collaborative research unit, and they worked together. They were researching pufferfish. I got really excited when the pufferfish got aggressive and went, then the celebrities over there in the top right, that is Connor McDavid. I won't even say what team he's on because I keep getting it wrong, but he is a hockey player. And so this little guy in the red shirt is a kindergartner who came in with, they had their dress rehearsal during the day, and the 3rd grade classes invited kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, and not 3rd grade, but kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade classes to come in. So this is a little kindergartner coming in, and I just have to show you because it's so cool, because I step away from the shaky microphone. So the kid comes in, and he's like, I don't know anything about sports, but he's like in his hockey position, and he's standing there, and then the little kindergartner comes over, and he has to like step on the button that makes him talk. So then he starts talking, and he's telling him all about his athlete, and then when he's done, he goes back into position, and the kindergartner was like, so that's one of our celebrities. The other celebrities are down in the middle. On the bottom, we've got Harriet Tubman there hanging out in the kind of like the back corner. Dr. Seuss. Oh gosh, Benjamin Franklin. That's what it was, right? Ben Franklin. The photo there on my left, I guess it's also your left, yeah, is a 2nd grader whose artwork was chosen to be part of the student. He'd done some research and worked with Mrs. Matusko, that art teacher, and his artwork was chosen to be part of the permanent student collection. And something that's really great about what Mrs. Matusko has done is that she has brought this from her previous district, where every year she picks 1 or 2 kids who have their student artwork framed, and it stays on display at school. It might be in the library, it might be in the office, and when they graduate high school, they take it with them, which is really, really sweet. So this little guy, he did this in 1st grade, and so when he's graduating from high school, if he wants his artwork, it goes to him, and there's a big ceremony that she started. There's a piece of artwork in the library now that was made by a kindergartner, and he's now in 4th grade. And when he's in high school, he doesn't get to keep it, because this thing is so amazing. It's like a multi-dimensional thing. It looks like a nest, and he made 3 robin's eggs. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I'm praying he doesn't want to take it. And then finally, Jane Goodall. We had Jane Goodall come on our Dress as Your Favorite Book Character Day, and she was kind enough to bring along a chimpanzee. There. So then the nitty-gritty stuff that Heather and Dorothy and I all would tell you, like the things that are really important about library, is having a flexible schedule, and that can be really tricky, but having some flexibility to be able to collaborate with teachers and do some of those projects that I just talked about that we do at MIW. The library curriculum is absolutely essential. It's the school curriculum, and whatever we do in library links in and weaves in with whatever we're doing at school. Whatever the kids are learning is what we do. We are so grateful for our support staff, for our ed techs. We would drown. We just wouldn't be able to offer the programming that we can offer if we didn't have our amazing support staff. The quality of materials that we get is so important as well. In our physical space, I know the entire district is like bursting at the seams, but physical space definitely is imperative to having things run smoothly. And then all 3 of us follow the standards. These AASL standards are the same standards that we all use to teach, but the library standards start with inquire, include, collaborate, curate, explore, and engage. And then within each of those standards, that graphic that's over there on the right-hand side is what we do. It just is a constant, like, weaving, like the infinity symbol of, like, we always are teaching kids to think, That's the most important thing, to be thinking about what you're learning, thinking about at MIW how you're being nice to other people. At MIW this particular week we're doing an extra boost of kindness, and so we've been talking all day about, what's something kind you've seen somebody else do. And then it just links in and it continues and it just weaves right up to Greeley Middle School.
All right, my pictures show a variety of things. The first one there are some students working on a puzzle to illustrate the fact that our room is more than just books. We usually have a puzzle going. There are things to color and puzzles, like word puzzles to fill out. So it's not just a room of books and that's it. Because it was School Library Month, I put out a piece of chart paper with a heart and the prompt that you can see at the top. I love my school library because, and it's a little hard to tell from where you're sitting, but the heart got all filled up. And every so often we would pop out and take a look at what they were writing. And that's what helps us get through the tougher days, when we get the love from the kids like that. And then the two pictures on the right are one above the other, are more from our poetry work this last month. As I said, we had them rotating around through stations to explore poetry through different modes. And you can see in the bottom right, that E right there, the stations were labeled POEM, and the E stood for use your eyes and your ears. And they had to click on our website. We had some videos linked there with some recitations of poetry. Some were animated, some were like someone standing there doing it, some were I don't know, just a wide variety of different things. So they rotated around the different stations, and we asked them to respond to it, just like, what's going to stick with you? What does that make you think about? Or, I don't know, things like that. So not just, a worksheet, but more of like reflecting for them. And then the big picture across the bottom is also maybe a little hard to see from where you are, but before poetry, we were studying biographies. And I should say a lot of what we do in our library is just get the kids, and this is in 4th and 5th grade class, primarily get them able to navigate the library independently, because if I do my job right, they don't need me after a while, and they can, or any of my help here, thank you Polly and Sally, if we do our jobs right, they should be able to come in, find what they want, and we have a self-checkout station so they can take what they want and leave. And yes, we are important. I'm not trying to talk you out of getting rid of me, or talk you into getting rid of me, but if we can get them independent, then I know that when they go to Heather, they're going to be in a good place. So they were researching, we were talking about biographies, and we asked them to write, pretend they were going to write a biography about their partner. And so we had a conversation about, well, how do we organize those on the shelves, and a little bit about call numbers. And we asked them to interview their partner. What would the biography be about? And then what you're seeing is them holding up their books, and we asked them to get in order as if they were on a shelf. So we had to practice alphabetizing, which takes some practice. And so each class stood in their row alphabetically as if their biographies were on the shelf. So that was a lot of fun. Hard to take a picture of though, sorry. And then we also vote for Chickadee since we have 4th graders. It's their last chance to vote. And 4th grade is also when they can start voting for Maine Student Book Award. And then our 7th and 8th graders can vote for North Star, which then they can keep voting for in the high school. We don't have the voting booths, but we have online voting. And so they have a Google form that they fill out for what books they read. Tommy, you might remember that. And so the first picture there on the top row is a fourth grader voting for Chickadee. And then the bottom left corner is the nominated titles for Maine Student Book Award. And after the voting, we reveal which book or books won in Greeley, like our first, second, third place, and then which ones were the state winners and runners-up. And this year we had a four-way tie. Four-way or three-way tie? Four-way tie for second place. I don't think that's ever happened before. Back up at the top, those two pink hearts, before our biography research or work, we did some nonfiction research. We asked the kids to find something that they were interested in and write a little tidbit on the heart showing they love this topic. And then they had to write the title and call number of the book, and we hung them on these strings in their respective sections. So all the books about sports, like were in the sports section, and all the cookbooks facts from cookbooks were hanging over there. And then later on, we asked them to go around and find a heart that was in a section that was different from there, so they could learn what their classmates or other students in their grade had learned about. The top right corner shows a collaboration we did with the other allied arts teachers. We brought a meteorologist in, and she talked to the kids about her work on the summit of Mount Washington and going to Antarctica. We had done some work in the libraries. The STEM class talked about snowflakes. They built snowflakes, which you can see down on the bulletin board. They built the ones with marshmallows and toothpicks. We had a snowflake maker station in the library with paper snowflakes, and so we put those together into the bulletin board, and we also decorated the podium when the meteorologist came. So that was a fun, collaborative project there. And then the last picture is, we could not survive without our volunteers. We have student volunteers. We used to have parent volunteers. I wish we could get some parent volunteers back. They help us out because we just can't do it all. So we rely on our volunteers to help us put books away, make new displays, all sorts of things. So, all right. This slide shows some of the ways to represent the data that has been collected during research over decades of the impact of student achievement from funded libraries with librarians. And it just backs up the importance of having a strong school library program, better scores, where a professional librarian is leading the library program. So it's pretty clear right there. And the second piece of the data shows that, interestingly, the improved scores are seen regardless of other variables, including income level and staffing levels. So just reinforces the idea of how important the school library is.
Okay, Dorothy's a little taller than I am, just a little. So here's some pictures from the high school, and one thing I would like to point out, so the two pictures on the top row, the first two pictures on the top row are some students doing crafting with some old books and other supplies, and it's a program that happened between Best Buddies and the Civil Rights team. And I would just like to put in a plug for how important it is for us to have after-school library time, how much we appreciate having a late bus so that kids have transportation, and how important it is for us to have that time staffed. And then the next picture shows a poetry cafe. Students wrote their own poems and based them on a mentor poem, and then wrote their own poems and read and shared those poems. in the library. Then there's some students posing with, on the bottom row, book spine poetry. And then there's some other students acting out a scene from Macbeth. And finally, some students, I just wanted to show you that teenagers are very social, and reading is a very social activity. And those two things come together quite happily in the library. Sometimes when you come into the GHS library, it's totally silent and you can hear a pin drop, and other times it is not. And that teenagers are social creatures, and we embrace that. So those are just a few of the things that happen in the library. I wanted to highlight our African American literature read-in, which happened all during the month of February. And it's something we've done for many years, but this year we got especially fantastic participation from English classes, and we did a variety of things. That picture I showed you at the beginning of the 3 students at a station watching a poem on an iPad and then reading other poems, that was happening all around the library with a couple of different English classes. In the middle on the top row is a class that chose to just come in and read selections of African American literature. The next picture on the top row, those 2 boys are reading, but they're also creating their own found poetry from taking quotes out of the books that they're reading. And then there's some other kids on the bottom row just perusing the selections. We got out, we have a really nice diverse selection of literature, both by and about African Americans, that they could choose from. So that research that we talked about earlier also shows some other important elements of an effective school library program. And again, all of these things are shown to impact test scores and student achievement. And I just wanted to highlight being staffed by a certified professional librarian, actually having an information literacy curriculum that you teach and that you work from like we do, having the opportunity to collaborate with teachers so that we're not just teaching these skills out of context in a special class where the teacher just drops the students off, but where we're working with the teacher and co-teaching and working with the existing curriculum in the school to work on those information literacy skills. And to do that, there's something called flexible scheduling, which allows, again, for librarians and teachers to work together and not be working each in isolation. So we're big dreamers, and since it is School Library Month, we thought we do dream of even better and stronger school library programs. So we have a very short wish list. Just thought we would share it, and we would love for these things to happen, but we would love to have full-time ed techs at both MIW and GMS. Both of those programs are extremely busy and barely keeping their heads above water. And flexible schedules so that we can teach in context instead of in isolation, in collaboration with our colleagues. And I think MIW especially would like more physical space, but that is not news to you, I'm sure. And this is a bibliography of the research that we referenced in the slides. because we're librarians and we always say those things. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I would just like to say it's so nice to see pictures of students with books in their hand. I don't want to ever take that for granted, so thank you for facilitating that.
They really prefer to read print books. You know, we have a nice, robust collection of ebooks available, but those are always the second choice. You know, I'll say, well, The Fault in Our Stars is out, but, and they sort of go, oh, all right, I have to, I'll read the ebook.
Others?
Yeah.
Actually, I have a follow-up question to that. How about audiobooks, and how do those factor into students' experiences?
So that same platform that offers ebooks for us also offers audiobooks, and those are really important. And we are part of a consortium with, it's called Sora Overdrive. If you see it on the line on the budget, you'll know now what it is. And we're part of a consortium of Maine schools that have a shared collection. So we all share titles, but then we can also buy our individual titles for our schools. So for example, I work from a list of English department required reading and specifically buy audiobook copies because they are still single copies. They're not like multi-use.
I also buy hard copy audiobooks, and you should come in the fall when the 4th graders come to the library for the first couple of times, and they are like, oh my gosh, their minds are just blown, and they check out every single audiobook, and we have hundreds of them, and they don't care what the book is. They just think it's the coolest thing in the world. And the demand has waned a little bit right now, but we have some CDs, we have some cassette tapes, those don't go out. They come on little, like, almost like a mini MP3 player, and they just have to plug their headphones in, and they're amazing. They're expensive, but they're worth every penny.
Yeah, all of our audiobooks are digital, and I say, you know, you can play this on your phone, and I always put in a plug for cleaning their rooms, because I say it's a great activity to do while you're doing something else that's not very exciting.
At the Mabel I. Wilson level, do you have the audiobooks where they could follow along with the book?
We don't have too many audiobooks, really, because they are, should I use the speaker?
Yeah, that's okay.
Oh gosh. We don't have too many audiobooks because they are expensive, as Dorothy said. And they are something that I want to have much more of. And there are some that I've guided kids to have accounts at Prince Memorial Library, or if they parents have an account in Portland, or any of the other libraries. The state offers access to audiobooks as well. But that actually is on my budget list for next year, to start getting quite a bit, because they wipe Dorothy out in the month of September when they become 4th graders. They are so excited. So we have a few, but not anywhere near enough. And they're asking for them all the time.
Okay.
I wanted to just say one other thing, and I meant to say it before, that I feel so lucky to work with these two amazing people. But what I was thinking of is we share our collections with each other. Yeah. Like, she'll have kids request my books. I'll have kids who request her books, and they all go in different directions, so we can maximize our collection that way too.
I did have, what was it, a 3rd grader, 2nd grader, who wanted Moby Dick. And I was like, are you sure? You're gonna read this? It's really long. Yes, wasn't it Moby Dick?
Yeah.
It was, yeah, and yeah, she's like, okay, I'll send it over. Kids reading it, renews it.
I had a question. Dorothy mentioned that you used to have more parent volunteers, and that you could use more right now. I'm sorry that I'm not volunteering myself at the moment. I'm wondering though.
Thursdays at 10, Jared.
Yeah, thank you. Is the word out? Do you feel like parents know that you could use more volunteers, or could you use help getting that message out more?
I don't. That's a good question. I don't think they know how desperate we are right now. I feel like they know we take volunteers. We have had them in the past. COVID really did a number on our volunteer army. But it gets announced like on Step Up, what's it called? Like Parent Information Night or Open House, things like that in the fall. It just got announced for the incoming 4th grade parent night a couple weeks ago. You're right, it probably wouldn't hurt to keep putting the word out. I have to say, we are drowning this year, particularly, and I just haven't had time to ask for more help. But obviously, I need it, so,
Okay.
So,
Do you have the mechanism to get the word out through either the email chains or?
My application is on the library website, so that is always there. But yeah, I definitely, and I think I've put it in admin notes a few times already, but or the newsletter. But I'll continue to do that. And
okay, now I wasn't saying it to put it back on you. I was just trying to figure out if there was anything that
I
board or
don't,
the administration can do to in one of our emails that go out to send the word.
Yeah, that would be great. I don't know other than COVID, like what happened that they've just literally all disappeared. So I don't know.
High school students do not want to see their parents. Come on.
Thank you all.
To trade stories with them, but.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
It was
you.
a great presentation. So, Jeff, related to volunteers, is there any restrictions at this point coming out of COVID?
No, there is not.
And
There hasn't been all year.
I also sort of feel like, as compared to where we were 3 or 4 years ago with the stories of people volunteering and stuff, it's much less now. So is there something that we could do to revive that, define the process, put the word out more?
I think it's just building, like Dorothy said, just building it back up. The people that were there before just probably got wiped out. They've found other things and are not back. Just kind of building up another base of volunteers. We're finding that across the board, libraries, classrooms, et cetera, just kind of getting the word out, getting parents back in, that we're back. We've been back all year and we'd love to have people in. We have a process, an application for doing that. If people are interested, they should do that. We can certainly put out in the district newsletter as well and, get the word out.
I know it's not called Aging in Place anymore, and I can't remember what the new name is, but
No, it's North Yarmouth, I'm sorry.
yeah, but that would be a great place to reach out to as well. Devin is really doing a great job of getting more seniors involved, and I'd love to see more seniors in the class, in the schools, so we can mention it to them.
I think that would be a great idea.
The district newsletter would help, and maybe even the building newsletters, just sort of add some emphasis to it.
Yep, well, I just made a note to do that, and we can get it out. And I just want to say before all of our library staff leave, our librarians and our support staff, these are among the best I've ever worked with, and I'm not just saying that, I really mean it. These are amazing library staff that we have, are amongst the very best I've ever seen. So thank you to all of you for your hard work in keeping our libraries really, I almost want to say festive. Every time I go by any of them, they're just always like exciting. The kids want to be there. There's so many smiles in the libraries. It's in the high school library, sometimes you're right, it's like quiet, and then sometimes it's like there's some big thing going on, a production or whatever, and it's happening in all three, and it's really exciting. They really are the hub of the school. So thank you for all the work. Everybody.
Thank you all. Anything else before we move on? Okay. So we will move to 6B, fiscal year 24, recommended budget summary by Jeff Porter. Jeff.
Not nearly as exciting as the library program, however, it does help with the money piece, and making sure that is in place for everything that we do academically and otherwise. So this is just a summary. This is the last summary really from the superintendent before it really turns over to being the board's place to make decisions around the budget. Not that the board hasn't been involved from the beginning, but this is really my final summary report on where the budget is at this moment. Some adjustments that have been made since I initially rolled out the budget on March 20th. There's been 4 major additions or deletions. One of them is that our health insurance, this is good news, came in much lower than we had expected. We had budgeted 6% increase, and it actually, for our district, we came in at 2.3%, which was a $219,000 savings to the budget, or I should say a decrease from what we had initially budgeted. So I want to thank all of our staff in our district. One of the reasons for that is our experience rating is very good, and that is one of the major factors that is looked at by our carrier. So that's very important. Public engagement, external assistance, that is for looking at some public engagement and communication for a potential new primary school and getting some outside assistance to help with that communication with the direction the board is choosing to go in over the next year or so. Permanent substitutes, we have over the last 3 years, we've been utilizing permanent substitutes. We actually had 8 budgeted for next year, and we found that that was not going to be enough. We really, our daily substitutes, just like we were talking about volunteers, we had an army of daily substitutes prior to the pandemic, and we have had a hard time rebuilding that army. And so investing in the permanent substitutes and adding 6 more positions to the budget, which I discussed with the board at the workshop a few weeks ago, felt like it was very important, and the leadership team is strongly behind this. So we're recommending 6 additional positions that are in this recommended budget. Special education out-of-district placement, this is just for a student need that came up, and we were short in this area and had to add 20,000. So the overall adjustment is in the negative slightly at $26,024 since March 20th. In terms of the budget, I feel like a slide is missing. In terms of where the budget is at, we're still at 7.40%. As you saw, it was just $26,000 out of a $47 million budget, so it really didn't move the expenditures at all. And most of those numbers are, changed slightly since March 20th. I did put some descriptors next to each of those cost centers, showing you those positions. That hasn't changed since March 20th, except for those 4 areas that I just showed you previously. But again, we're talking about a budget that is mostly salary and benefits, new positions to support enrollment growth, RTI, supporting RTI throughout, special education in the areas of functional life skills and behavior, and looking at coaching positions and making sure that those are not having to be raised by the booster funds, that those positions should be in the general fund, which is something we've been doing for years. Working to prepay expenses where we can to realize savings in the next fiscal year. We have inflation, and we have increased costs in things like liability insurance, legal costs. We are trying to do more with our strategic plan in the area of belonging and inclusion. Obviously, we have some additions of custodial and maintenance staff as well to keep up with the demands of the real estate, the modulars, the increasing enrollment. That's all tied to that. And then looking at our debt service, we're actually decreasing in debt service, although this recommended budget also puts in the principal amount for the SSRF funds, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So one thing I didn't mention at the last time on March 20th was a list of areas that we had brought to the Finance Committee for consideration. Many of these items we had not recommended at the administrative level or at the district level prior to going to the Finance Committee, and then there was areas that the Finance Committee weighed in on. But there's just under $900,000 in strategic priorities that were not advanced during this budget cycle, and just wanted to kind of put that out there And a lot of these were significant needs that we had had to weigh with other priorities in the district. And, you know, at the end of the day, not everything is going to make it through. These were important considerations. And the first two having to do with 3 bus drivers and 1 school bus, that means at this point that we're looking at a slight schedule change. I did put that schedule change out in a newsletter. It's gone to all staff and all parents at this point in the district, letting people know that it is quite likely at this point that we are moving to a new schedule. We think it's the best thing to do at this point, and the Finance Committee agreed in terms of it is very difficult to find bus drivers, and to add 3 bus drivers, I think that's one of the most challenging things. We also have some retirements of bus drivers coming up, so trying to find several bus drivers at a time when it's very difficult to hire them made it very necessary. But we also have a lot of considerations about the school schedule, where students are getting to school late day in and day out, and we need to put a close to that, and changing the schedule seemed like the very best situation. So, but there's a lot of items on here. This is presentation will be on the website tomorrow, and people can look at things if they'd like to look through those specific areas. The revenue has not shifted since March 20th. We are up 12.93% in our revenue, mostly because of the state subsidy. The state is giving us about just under 1.7 million more in state allocation funds to MSAD 51, which brings us to 14.6 million in state subsidy. Cumberland's estimated tax effect has gone down since March 20th. I believe I talked about 4.6%, and we're at 61 cents on the mill at this point. 2.87% would be the tax effect for the town of Cumberland, for those people who are homeowners in the town of Cumberland. So for every $100,000, it's $61. So if you have a $400,000 home, just multiply 61 times 4, and there is your tax increase, or proposed tax increase for Cumberland. So we've kept it as low as possible on the tax side. I'd like to thank both towns, the town of Cumberland and the town of North Yarmouth, for doing yeoman's work and working with the SAD year in and year out to help with the tax effect. So in North Yarmouth, similar picture, it's 47 cents on the mill, or 2.6% increase over the current year. So for every $100,000 of assessed property value, it's $47 that would be assessed. So again, really low amounts in terms of what these tax effects could be. And again, thanking both towns, especially the managers of both towns, for working hard with us in keeping the tax effect as low as possible. And I showed this slide on March 20th, and I thought it was worth showing again that over the next 12 months, temporary space in our district, there's different sources where this money will come from, but the district will be, this proposed budget, or it's really not part of the budget necessarily, but this proposed cost for temporary space is just over $2 million, $2,050,000. And the lion's share comes from capital reserves, unallocated fund balance, which will be $1.4 million. And that is for setup costs for a new unit at Mabel Wilson School, which will be 12 rooms, removing 2 smaller units of 4 rooms, and removing and rebuilding the playground at the Wilson School, and resurfacing the play areas and expanding the fence line. These are all necessary items for the next 5 years, and thank you to the board for approving this as part of the short-term facilities plan back in February. Also, we have $40,000 for furniture that we're hoping to prepay in the current fiscal year, not in FY24, and to prepay the 12-room unit, which will be going to the Wilson School, is $250,000 for a lease, and we'll be prepaying the FY24 lease in the current fiscal year. And then we have ongoing costs for the existing modular units on our campus, and that is a recurring cost, annual cost of $337,000. That's already in the budget, but in the general fund budget will be going forward. So there's no additional costs in the general fund for temporary space. We've tried to do that going forward in FY24 in the general fund. We've tried to take care of those costs in other ways, as you can see. But all told, the expense for all of the temporary space for the next 12 months is just over $2 million. And that is phase one. We have a phase two, which is Greeley Middle School, where the enrollment will be absolutely taking off very quickly over the next year. And we will have phase two, as was approved by the board, as part of this, the short-term facilities plan, and we'll have those numbers as we start the budget cycle next year. Also, usually during this meeting, just for the purposes of putting all of our information out, even if it's not in the general fund, and these are areas that are not in the general fund and are not raised by local taxes, we're the recipient of state and federal grants, as many districts in the state of Maine are. We usually don't get a lot of information about state and federal grants this early. The only one that we typically have a pretty good handle on from the state, and we just got this about a week ago, this figure, and these are all preliminary at this point, is our federal Title I, Title IIA, and Title IV monies, which help defray costs for reading and math at Mabel I. Wilson School, which is part of our Title I program there. So we're expected to receive $117,537 in next school year, which is just slightly up from the current year. We have not received our special education funds, but we have typically received, $450,000 or $460,000, somewhere in that range. That's the current year, and we're anticipating that we'll receive that amount, but again, until we get that number, we won't know. We also, just to remind you, as the voters approved the revolving renovations at the Wilson School last June, that's $1.5 million. That project will be starting this summer, and most of it will be completed, although we'll have some ongoing parts of that project that will continue beyond the summer. And then we're asking voters, if the board approves that later this evening, you'll be asking voters to accept revolving renovation money for Greeley High School in the science wing, which we have received from the state, and we'll have more details on that in a minute, but it's $1 million. Gifted and Talented, currently we have $208,000 that we receive from the state for Gifted and Talented staffing. That's for teachers. And we have not received our tentative amount yet. As soon as we have those numbers, I'll be plugging those in, and we'll update the website just to let people know that these are expenses that happen outside of the general fund. For capital projects, the proposed capital projects are on this list. This is a complete list now with all the figures. Some of these numbers were here on March 20th and others were not. Again, the $1.423 million, which is the MIW modular space and short-term facilities plan. There's a district phone system placeholder in there for $575,000. Again, these are all coming out of capital reserve, which is unallocated fund balance, which would be transferred to capital in order to pay for these costs. So it would not be a tax increase and is not part of the general fund. The phone system in the district is dying. It's been dying for years, and it's getting to the point where it is a major safety issue. I don't say that lightly. And the safety committee has recommended that the district go ahead and purchase a new phone system for the entire district. We really cannot wait another year. It's absolutely critical. It's crucial that we have working phones and working intercom systems in our district. So this would take care of both of those. The recess doors at Greeley Middle School are rusting and coming off the hinges and need to be replaced. So that's a safety issue. That's $10,000. The high school office, we've been reconfiguring offices. We did the Wilson School last summer. The middle school, we've made some modest changes there, but the high school office needs a much larger reconfiguration for safety. These were things that were pointed out to us as well as part of the Homeland Security audit a few years ago. We're continuing to work through some of these things. It's getting to the point where with the double doors, interior and exterior now that are locked, and looking at all the configurations in our offices for optimal safety, considering national events that have been going on, these are the recommendations that we're wanting to move on. So it would cost about $110,000 in order to reconfigure the high school office for optimal safety. At the Wilson School, as part of the enrollment and space crunch, we are having a very difficult time fitting students into the cafeteria with 4 lunches at this point in the current cafeteria, and so we're proposing that we spend just under $133,000 on removing the stage at the Wilson School, putting a window in at the end of that room, as well as we'll be having some HVAC improvements in there as part of the revolving renovation. This is separate from the revolving renovation. This is not part of the revolving renovation money, so it would come out of capital reserves to pay for that. The entrance canopies at Mabel I. Wilson School, if you've looked at those, we've had a lot of other things we've been doing to keep up with our facilities. This is one that we really can't let go much further. They're rusting, and they're desperately in need of repair and refinishing. And those are those canopies in the main entrance and in the library entrance. They are, if you look up, you'll see they're rusting badly, so we need to take care of them. That is a $60,000 expense to do that. The snack shack at the field house, we have now put bathrooms in the field house. Again, that was something a project that started a year ago. Winters happened, and we just finished them last week, and they look great, and I'll show you pictures later. We don't have a figure yet on that, but we are in need of putting a snack shack in because the bathrooms replaced the snack shack, so we don't have a figure yet. And then, of course, the SRRF funds should be the SRRF funds, School Revolving Renovation Funds. Again, that's all the stuff that will be done at the Wilson School, and that is this portion of it is the state fund. So we're proposing to use $2.3 million in capital reserves in the next fiscal year starting this summer. Outside the general fund, we have a food service enterprise fund. Again, this is not part of the general fund. This operates by itself, and if you recall, you might have recalled that years ago we had to kind of bail out the food service program. We ran a deficit for a few years. In the last 3 years, we've been running a fairly healthy surplus. So the year-end estimate that we're looking at this year is about $136,000, and we had a surplus last year of $177,622. Some of that, or a lot of that money, is going to buy a new freezer at the high school. There's a walkout freezer that has been broken. It is taking a long time to get that replaced because of parts, but that is a very necessary item in our program, and those are the kind of things that we use that money for when there is a surplus. So again, we're looking at that, and it's outside the general fund. Here's our expenditure and tax history. You can see that we have really tried to be as responsible as possible with our budgets, not only on the expenditure side, but also on the tax effect for both communities. And again, thanking both towns, you can see that we're anywhere from 0 on the tax effect for the SAD up to a high of 4.42% back in 2019, and proposing this year 2.87% in Cumberland and 2.60% in North Yarmouth. So again, very modest for the most part expenditure and tax effects. This is the largest expenditure increase that has been proposed over the last decade, in our SAD, but yet the tax effect is still very low. So we are, I think, in a good position with that, and the board should feel very proud of that. This is a regional comparison. If you want to look at expenditures, you'll see that expenditures of 7.40 in our district measure up very comfortably to other surrounding districts. In fact, we're right in the middle of the pack, if not on the low side on the expenditure side. Many are, Falmouth's at 7.96, about where we are. Yarmouth's at 6.30. Cape Elizabeth's at 9.32 on the expenditures, and you can see Gorham is over 12%, Portland 8%. It's all over the place, but we're right there in the middle. On the tax effect side, we are basically the lowest except for Freeport. And I think they have 3 towns, and all 3 towns were around 2.5 to 2.78% on the tax effect. So except for RSU 5, we are the lowest in the region for tax effect this year. Really considerable when you're looking at the spread of the tax effect anywhere from RSU 5 and MSAD 51 all the way up to 19% on the tax effect in Gorham currently. Raw and adjusted per pupil cohort comparison. I don't think I had the Cape numbers last time, Cape Elizabeth, but we really can show those numbers 2 different ways. One is the raw per pupil cost. We're at $21,860 per student. Yarmouth's at $21,912. This is before revenue is factored in. This is just total budget. Falmouth's at $22,784, and Cape Elizabeth's at $22,979. So you can see we're the lowest. Just looking at the raw numbers without revenue factored in. When you look at the revenue factored in, we're a fairly high receiving revenue district compared to the other 3. We received almost $8 million. And when you look at the tax assessment that we're actually asking from our communities and factor in the revenue, we are, of course, low in both areas. So whether it's the raw cost per pupil without the revenue factored in, or you're factoring the revenue in, our cost per pupil with revenue factored in is $14,985. And you can compare that to Yarmouth at $17,646, Falmouth $16,520, and Cape Elizabeth $20,560 per student. So certainly the lowest among the 4 districts that we tend to all compare ourselves budgetarily anyway, and sometimes otherwise. So just giving you an idea, this is just another way of looking at that same exact information in terms of per pupil cost, and this is the raw per pupil cost and not with the revenue factored in. So general fund budget next steps. There's a public hearing, obviously, that was tonight, is happening right after this, tonight. Next Monday night, the board votes to decide whether to adopt the budget or not, or recommend a different budget. At that point, it becomes the board's budget as of May 1st. The board also would vote to set the district budget meeting date and to set the budget validation referendum date next week, and sign all the warrants for the BVR. On the 18th of May is the district budget meeting, and that will be in the Art Center at 7 o'clock. That's open to any voters in Cumberland, North Yarmouth. Please come out, and where you get to vote on all of the cost centers of the budget and on the total budget that goes forward to the voters on June 13th, which is the budget validation referendum at polling stations. And then on Monday, June 20th, based on the results of the June 13th referendum on the budget, the board would certify the results of the BVR. And that's a regular board meeting on June 20th. So for more information on our budget, this is where you would go. It's on our web page. Just go to board at the top, scroll down to budget, which is where the green arrow is, and there's all the information, all the presentations, and this presentation will be up on this page as well. And finally, there is another item that will be on the ballot. Actually, it will be a separate ballot. And this is for the school revolving renovation funds for Greeley High School. So project number 1 was last June. Voters approved the Mabel I. Wilson School upgrades that will be starting this summer. And this is another project that the district was awarded by the state for Greeley High School to do a complete HVAC upgrade in the science wing of the high school for $1 million. So much like the Mabel I. Wilson School SRRF, we have there's 2 parts to it. One is the loan forgiveness part. So about 48% of that amount the Maine Department of Education will basically give for free. So if you saw the movie, for free, yes, it is actually for free from the state. So you pay for it some way or another, but not local. Yeah, so that will be about $478,000 in loan forgiveness. And then interest-free loan, 52% of that, which is $522,000 or so, over a 10-year term. And the state of Maine has agreed to lend this amount, so about half of it, at 0% for 10 years. So this is very similar to the Mabel I. Wilson School SRRF that the voters approved last June. Voters, as long as the board agrees tonight to put this forward, voters will be given the opportunity to vote on this project. Again, very similar terms. It is really a great project to get some of the renovations done in our district with money that is given to us by the state, either as free or at 0%. And this is a combination of the two. So these are good projects that the state has available. And I like to, nobody ever thanks the state for anything. I'd like to thank the state of Maine for providing these kinds of projects for us to apply for and then to receive. So the timeline for the SRRF, the next steps would be Monday, April 24th, tonight. The board would set the public hearing date if it chooses to do so, and that's later in the agenda. The board would set a referendum date as well, and the board would sign the warrants this evening if it chooses to move forward with the SRRF. And then on June 5th, if the board proceeds with this, we would hold a public hearing, or the board would hold a public hearing at its regular meeting on June 5th on the SRRF project. So that's a separate public hearing from the budget public hearing tonight, just for this purpose. And then on June 13th, if the board proceeds tonight, the referendum would be held on the same day as the budget, the regular budget. So there'll be 2 ballot sheets, and voters would be asked to decide if they wanted to accept this project or not. And then again on June 20th, the board would certify the results of both the general fund budget that's proposed, and then if the board moves forward with the SRRF project for the high school, they would also certify that on June 20th, whatever the results are. So that is the budget summary in a nutshell.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions from the board? Been over this many, many times.
Yes, and I'd like to thank once again the Finance Committee. There's tons of meetings that the Finance Committee held, and so thank you to the Finance Committee. I also like to thank our Finance Director for so much of the work, getting everything ready, set, and working hard on all the numbers and getting all the paperwork ready and just kind of make sure everything's in order. So
I'll second that. Thank you to the Finance Committee. Thank you to Jeff and Scott. And I'll point out again that if you included the various wish lists, we started at 18% this year in a very tough year, and we're landing with a tax impact of under 3%. So kudos.
Amazing.
It's also worth pointing out that our expenditures are 7.4%, but our tax impact is under 3%. that margin is sort of kicking the can down the road, and that is the growth in our town offsetting those additional expenses, which eventually adds up to we need a new school. So it's worth pointing that out. While the growth is a nice sort of benefit that it dilutes our cost, eventually that catches up with you with additional houses and kids and that sort of thing.
Right.
So, moving on, now we move to the public hearing. So, how does that work?
If there's anyone that, just announcing the public hearing, and if there's anyone that wants to come up and speak, and we have a huge audience of people that may want to speak.
Okay, so if you would like to speak at the public hearing, please step up to the mic, introduce yourself, and share, ask questions.
My name is Brenda Sherwin. I live in West Cumberland. I love it was free money. Who is the state? Can you tell me the names of those people? It's us. We're paying for it. And have you considered what the council is doing about affordable housing under TIF? We're going to bring in a lot more students, and we don't have the facilities now for what we have. We're not managing the growth of this town. So that's my point.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Don't disagree. Others that would like to speak? Okay.
Jason, I actually have something.
Go for it.
Okay. So it's less about the budget itself, but more about logistics. And it hadn't really hit me until you presented those the slides about our capital projects, Jeff. There's a lot there, and it's looking like it'll be a really busy summer on this campus. Do we have the internal capacity to be managing all of that, all of these different things happening all at once during a busy summer?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. And that's basically Don Foster, myself, plus the contractors that work with us. We're basically masters of pulling this stuff off over the summer. This would be, while it looks like a lot that's up there, we've had even more than this in previous summers. So, okay. Especially around the modulars and the site work and so forth, and our preferred vendors that we work with. So, yeah.
And the vendors are all lined up and have schedules?
They're all ready to go. We have schedules, we have proposals, we have
all
everything in line to move it forward. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, though, to raise, because this has been going on for summer after summer after summer. We've been not just doing small things like most districts do, you know, here and there to kind of get ready for the next year. We're doing big things and small things at the same time in a very short period of time. And I would say that it does, you know, put a strain on our staff, it puts a strain on the people that are supervising. Scott does a lot of the legwork to make sure everything's in order prior to all the projects, so that literally the day that school is over, that later that afternoon, literally things start up around here. Yeah. We don't waste any time. And we do have really good vendors that we've been working with for many years. The companies that have been working with us, they really, I think we have a good, Scott especially has a good relationship with those vendors, and I think that makes a huge difference in making sure things, and Don Foster he's here all the time, making sure things are going well. So we have good oversight on that, but it is a lot of work.
Yeah, I hope that everybody is able to mix in a healthy amount of vacation time.
I take mine in
I
November.
say that all the time.
Oh. Not in the summer.
Okay. Any other comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And anything else from the board before we move on? Okay. So we'll move to 8 items for action. So the first item that we have is, well, I'll ask Jeff or Scott to take us through a relatively thorough history of how we got here and what we're talking about tonight.
I'll start, and then Scott can maybe fill in some finer details. So this discussion about the possible acquisition of land abutting the campus has been an ongoing one for, quite honestly, decades. I mean, I think there's been, beyond many of us in this room, there have always been opportunities that have come up about purchasing land that's right next to the campus, that abuts the campus here in Cumberland, and those opportunities come and they're weighed, and those are important decisions. And there's many reasons why the district may or may not be able to do it at a particular time. This particular property that has come up for discussion, I believe these discussions happened at least 18 months ago they started, maybe even longer than that, because of an opportunity. Again, whenever an opportunity comes up, it's like being a landowner, having your own home. If your neighbor says, hey, are you interested in some acreage here, is certainly something you have to weigh and think about and very carefully consider, because it's important. And that is exactly what has happened in this case. An opportunity has arisen where the district has been offered, there's an offering at this point of purchasing 2 acres of land that abut the current campus in Cumberland, and for a price of $756,000, which would be payable over a 5-year period of time, is important. And I have brought this to the table. Mr. Poulin has worked hard on the finer details of this arrangement with the landowner and looking at this. There's a lot of reasons why this makes good sense at this time, notwithstanding the fact that this current campus is very overcrowded. And we are running into issues at this point around traffic, parking, safety. I'll say safety again because that one seems to come up a lot, and open space. Those are huge factors. We do not have enough land. I think a lot of people know that we already use Twin Brook for all things considered, and obviously that will need to continue. But having just any sort of open space that can be used for relieving the overcrowded conditions on our campus, and this is not to deal with the whole issue of a 4th school building. This is to deal with what we currently have for conditions. And even if a 4th school building is built and built off of campus, we still have way more kids on this campus, and will have way more kids than we have in many of the years previous to this. This is land that will be here for perpetuity. The land that you see on the campus in Cumberland was bought in this way over a period of time. Started back in the 1860s with the Institute, with the land, and successively there have been additions of parcels of land to the campus over a period of time to get to what it is. These offerings are rare, and they only come up once in a while, and I think the price that this particular landowner has asked the board if the board would like to consider is a fair and reasonable price, and it is absolutely necessary, and it is a strong recommendation for me that that we move forward with abutting land to relieve the stress of the overcrowded campus that we have. And Scott, do you want to fill in any finer details?
No, just that we have an option agreement to vote on tonight, and the property, and just that it's a $10,000 option on the property with $46,000 more at closing, $700,000 financed over a 5-year period, about $140,000 a year at 3% interest, which is where that project's at. So,
okay. So to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Scott. So the 10 plus the 46 we're paying this year would come out of the capital reserves. Isn't going to affect the current proposed budget.
That's correct. It would come out of capital reserve, and the entire amount, the option and the $46,000 payment reduce the selling price down to $700,000, which would be financed.
So the remaining $700,000 is financed over 5 years, so $140K a year at 3%, and we have the ability to put that into the general budget or potentially use it from capital reserves.
Yeah, we could look at what we have on hand for fund balance at the end of the fiscal year, and determined that in all likelihood, it probably won't come out of the general fund. It'll probably come out of fund balance at the end of the year.
Okay. And how does this dovetail with potentially building a new school and that debt?
Good question. So, by the time we take on the debt on a new building, even if we were to, have a referendum and get it done fairly quickly, school project's going to be 3 years. And then by the time you do a couple of tax anticipation or bond anticipation notes and then enter into permanent financing, this property would be paid off before we started paying on the new school. And then there's also another piece of that in the year 2031, there's about $800,000, I believe it is, it drops off in debt and actually comes off and out of our budget for the high school renovations that we had done 20-something years ago.
So we've heard from Jeff, his recommendation. Scott, you personally, would you like to have this space for the district long-term?
Absolutely. We've had a number of opportunities over the years to purchase properties adjacent to the district. And each time we've failed to do so, and we've regretted it each time over my 26 years here, I think. So, yes, I think this would be a reasonable purchase and an appropriate purchase for the district on the campus.
Cool. It's worth pointing out that this parcel does not have any buildings on it currently, which sort of helps the price. We've been offered other parcels that have buildings on them, and that sort of inflates the price, buildings that we don't really want, maybe. So I'll open it up to the board here in a moment. What we're voting on here tonight is there would be potentially 2 votes. So the first one would be to enter into this option agreement. And then the next one, if we acted on the option agreement, and that was a positive vote, if that carries, then the next vote would be to put it to a vote at the next referendum to the voters. So this is not where we are choosing to do this. We're choosing to put it to the voters to decide. Okay. So I'll open it up to the board. Chair, please rehash what we have spoken about in executive session if you would like.
I will start. I am not in favor of purchasing more land. A couple reasons. I think $140,000 a year with 3% interest, we could go to something else, whether putting it into the general budget or pulling out of capital reserve. I feel that we really need to focus on a 4th location for the new school. I don't think we should even ask the voters for more money at this point when we're going to be having a huge ask in a year. And I just think it'll be perceived as we're just asking for more and more money. And we're potentially, if we keep the North Yarmouth site available, that's a lot of land and usable land we could use.
Okay, others?
And I agree with Vanessa on this one. I have my own little democratic process going internally right now because about 48% of me feels like it is our responsibility to put it to the voters so that they can decide. But by putting it to the voters, what we are saying is that we want to buy this property. So about the other 52% just feels like exactly what Vanessa said. I don't think this is the time, even though it's such a great opportunity to buy land. But if we are committed to the idea that we are a 2-campus district, then I think, and Vanessa, you mentioned this kind of at the end, if we are able to secure a 2nd campus, there's a lot we can do with that would alleviate the crowding. I could see us moving maintenance over to that new facility, having ball fields that are usable to other grades. I think that we can be more creative with a space that we need anyway. So I am very hesitant to approve this, even though I really do respect the idea that it is our job to offer to the community opportunities that come up.
Jeff and Scott, what are some of the uses that you can see for this parcel, and does this 2 acres, how does 2 acres here compare to an extra 20 acres in North Yarmouth as far as usefulness?
I guess I would just first say that we have 3 large buildings on one parcel of land. If you look at a campus, for example, like Falmouth, where Falmouth has also 3 large buildings, they have their entire school district, as we do, on one campus. They have a huge amount of land, far more acreage than we do, and they have opportunity for even more acreage because of the land that's behind their campus. So in terms of we're pretty much landlocked unless there is an opportunity to purchase something that's abutting the campus. There is no opportunity to add land to our campus. We're already out of space, and the idea of having another campus is absolutely critical. We need to have a 4th school, and we need to have it sooner than later. But I see this as almost a separate issue dealing with this campus and the fact that it continues to grow, notwithstanding the fact that we need another school. So I think just the space itself, there are many, many uses. I don't know if I want to go into a list of what we could use it for, but there are many uses for 2 acres of land next to a crowded school district.
And Scott, how does 2 acres here compare to an extra couple acres in North Yarmouth, as far as how you'd use it?
How would I use it? I don't think I would use it for a maintenance facility in North Yarmouth because most of our assets are here on this campus, and it would be very difficult to have all of our equipment, all of our vehicles, and all of our maintenance over in North Yarmouth transporting over here. But I always think that anytime you've got property that abuts you, whether you're a homeowner or a business owner or a school district, you really need to take a hard look at adding that to your property and see if it makes sense over time. And whether there's an immediate use for it, there will be a future use for it. And if we don't purchase this property, I think we'll regret it down the road, as we have in the past, when we've allowed properties such as this to slip through our fingers in the district. So that would be where I would be coming from on it, Jason, that I would always want to look at property that's adjoining us and adding it to the campus, because I think if we don't, we could not have the opportunity again, because I truly believe there'll be houses on there and we won't have the opportunity again to purchase it.
So what are the ancillary costs if we do purchase this land to actually make it usable? The road, easements, all of that. Have we looked into that at all?
It's going to depend on what the use is, and I'm certain that the facilities committee would meet and talk about all of the ideas that we have for the use of that property, if we would use it. But certainly there's always site costs involved anytime you do any kind of construction. Absolutely.
Christina?
So I agree, it's a wonderful opportunity that is not timely whatsoever. I just really feel I need to stay focused on the new school. I'd like to keep the public focused on the need for the new school. It's painful because it's right there. It's a good price, and yet we're going to need so many capital funds for the unfortunate modulars we're going to need more and more until this building is finally built. And I don't like to see the piggy bank being shaken so much before we finally get that school in. And I find this whole thing very painful because it's right there. And no, we can't use it to build a new school. It's not enough land. But it's just not the right time. So painfully, that's where I'm at.
Mike, please.
So I appreciate my colleagues' concern and have similar concerns, but I'm actually completely supportive of this. Number of reasons, a couple of which has been said. I think just said the one piece of putting this to voters for them to decide is pretty clear and important one. I think that makes a lot of sense to me, and so that's one. Also, I think it's a good thing if honestly this is an interesting issue, and so voters can see that perhaps the board is not, is debating this for good reason. So fully support putting it to voters. I actually support the idea because it's not only is it rare for a budding land to come to us, but a budding land without a building on it, where the building jacks the price up quite a bit. So the price is quite reasonable. And so this district has needed to expand its footprint for quite some time. And that there was opportunities many years ago, Scott has experienced, and previous boards passed on it. And there's just deep regret every time looking back at passing on that. And I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think we can move forward on this, putting it to the voters, and the voters say no for whatever litany of reasons there are. That's fine. But I think if we put this forward to voters and they approve it, we can figure out a way to get the fourth building built on a different campus while also utilizing this really great opportunity to help with the short-term crunch of space.
I feel so conflicted because I think there are so many benefits of this, and I also don't want to do anything that would jeopardize the new school project moving forward. I think it is hard not to regret land decisions that weren't followed through in the past by previous boards, because land then was so much more affordable than it is now. I mean, you know, we're in Cumberland Center, so that adds a premium to land even without a structure on it. That being said, I think there is a need for us to expand our footprint even with the hopeful building of a primary school off campus. Even when we move those students off campus, as has been said, we already are so tight. And aside from other things that have possibly been discussed, even when you think about other ways that it could be used for outdoor learning opportunities, greenhouses, just green space. You know, our campus has so much concrete and so few trees and so few green space. And so there are ways that we can thoughtfully use this property in the short term to deal with the overcrowding as we address the need for a new primary school and beyond. But again, yeah, I mean, I definitely feel on the fence, and I feel that it's the right decision to take it to the voters with all of these reasons behind it and see how the community feels about it.
So I would like to add, I've also been torn this entire time because coming onto the board this year, like the main focus has been the fourth building, and I do have concerns around communication and messaging about space and land acquisition. But if we really want to manage growth of the growth that it's already happened, I think as our public comment earlier talked about how we've done that, we haven't been able to manage growth on this campus, and without the opportunity for a budding land, which is this pretty much the only last piece of land that doesn't have houses on it that is next to our campus.
Yeah.
So this could be the last opportunity, and I'm going to assume that if this land, if we don't move forward, that it probably will be developed, is the working assumption. And while I truly wished we would have had a school that passed in November and were able to focus on building out that site, what we have right now is building out more modulars. We just talked about phase 1 that's going in this summer, but there's a whole other project for next summer that's putting more modulars on this very small site, and there isn't the space for it, and there are a lot of safety concerns that aren't going to be able to be addressed on this current campus, amongst other things, without having this additional land. And I'm really committed at being on the board, at least for the next 2 years, of working together with the board and with the communities to make sure that we're using the space that we have in the best way possible for our communities with this growth that's already happened, and I don't see it slowing down. So I just want to be able to have more options available to us, and this is an option.
And I'm going to say one more thing, if I can. I just think the money that we're spending on the land could be utilized somewhere else within the budget. And I just don't think this is a good use of that money. And that's it. Yes, would I like more land? Yes, I'd like to buy 5 acres all the way around. But just at this time, and being the finance chair, I see other things. I mean, we just passed a whole slew of $800,000 of items that we couldn't approve. And so, and I know that's ongoing within the budget, so I just have a hard time with 2 acres that we don't know what we're going to do. We don't know the cost of what we're going to do with it. It's very hard to spend that money that way. Even ask the voters to.
There are some things we can come up with more of, but land, if we wanted it someday, we can't. I hear you.
Yeah, I would add, I agree with some of my earlier colleagues. The timing is terrible on this, but we didn't control the timing. Unfortunately, this has been offered to us now. If we pass on it and don't vote on it during this election cycle, the seller will go to market with it, and this time in 2 years from now, there'll be probably 3 houses on that land right next to the school. We're sitting on. This building is on land that was bequeathed to our predecessor institution 160 years ago. In 5 years, this land will be paid for, and we will own it forever. It'll be here for the school for future needs that we can anticipate and some that we can't anticipate. So I wish this was happening another time, but I think we have to make the right decision. Irrespective of our need for a 4th school, we have to, as Mike says, walk and chew gum at the same time here. So I support putting it to the voters.
Yeah, I acknowledge the timing is really tough and to bring this to the board, but we can't really control. I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Or?
No.
Oh.
Vanessa's telling me not to speak. Trying to silence me.
Here, I'll speak for you now. I will just put in context, if you go to a lot, not every school district, but many school districts in Maine, that you will find one building on the size property that we have for 3 large schools. You'll only find one school, and it's usually a smaller school than any of the 3 we have. So I think just putting it in context in the state of Maine, that is often the case. It is bad timing, I acknowledge it, it really is. But this is also a good opportunity. Probably there's never good timing. And like 160 years ago, all those decisions that kept getting made over time have led to where we are today. And thankfully there's as much land as there is right here on this campus, but it is a rare opportunity. And actually, Leanne, I didn't think about that until you said it. It is the last, you're right, it's the last piece of land that doesn't have a building on it.
That's
around
at least,
this campus.
that's at least 2 acres.
That's at least, there isn't anything. Yeah, you're right.
And,
that's an interesting point.
I'm
Tom
sorry.
does have something to say.
You could. Go. Would you like to talk, Tom?
No, go ahead, Scott.
Okay, so anyway, so, it's ironic for me because I've been around for a while, and this same conversation has happened a number of times about properties abutting the campus. It's never the right time. It's too much money. Even last times we were looking at it, people thought it was too much money. So, so that's the irony for me, is that it's come up a number of times and it's never been the right time. When is the right time? Okay. So.
I'm really curious, Vanessa, what do you where you think I'm going with this?
I'm really excited to hear what you have to say now, Tom.
So, I've been reluctant to speak because I've changed my mind about 5 times as this conversation has been going on. And coming into this, like even before today, I've been pretty firmly against this because I feel like we need to have this singular goal of passing the new school, and anything that will stand in the way of that or make it harder for us to do that, we shouldn't pursue it. So that's been really the sole thing that has kept me from supporting this. But my thinking has evolved. It's the right thing to do for the district, for a lot of the reasons that have been cited tonight. We do need the space. We have a very very crowded campus. I hate the fact that we've lost a playing field where my son played Little League as a 6-year-old, and the kids can't go out there and play during recess. And everything has been shifting around on this campus. We need some room to breathe. Vanessa, I see your point about like the $800,000 of priorities that we didn't advance in our budget, but we could advance those things next year or the year after that or the year after that. This is our one shot at this land. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be dumb for us not to at least just put it to the voters to see if they support this. And then we can see how things go with the new school referendum next year. I mean, these are two separate issues, and it's on us if we want the voters to really support that new school to make a strong case for it. And I would hate for us to get in a situation where we put it on a referendum again next year, the new school, and it doesn't pass, and we look back at this and think like, why did we not pursue this? Like, we didn't even get this new school anyway. Yeah, the timing is unfortunate, but I think it's the right thing to do.
In our family, when an opportunity comes up, we have a little saying or question that we do, which is, can we afford to save this much? And sometimes the answer is yes. Like, it's the cost savings does make it an opportunity to find the money. And then there are other times where we say it's an amazing deal, but we just don't even have the money, regardless of the deal. So I am still on that side, and in no way negating anything anyone has said. I am, like you said, Tom, I am so conflicted on this, and Christine, as you said, it's painful, but I am maintaining that I don't think we can afford to save this much, and I am a no.
Okay, further discussion? Okay, I do need a motion if we're going to move forward with this.
I'll move to authorize the superintendent of schools to execute and deliver the option agreement in form presented at this meeting, and to execute and deliver such other documents and instruments, and take such other actions as may be required to provide the district the right to purchase certain premises of William D. Wyatt adjoining the district school campus in Cumberland for a price of $756,000, and otherwise on terms and conditions stated therein. Said purchase to be subject to voter approval of the acquisition financing of the premises at district referendum.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Jared, thank you. Further discussion?
Just that motion needed a few periods and less commas.
It was a little long-winded.
To get our librarians back in here.
All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and Tommy 7. All opposed? Christina, Vanessa, Kim. 6-3, motion carries. Thank you all. Moving on to the next item, 8B. Is there a motion?
I recommend that we vote to call referendum for adjoining land purchase and funding, and approve the warrants and public hearing notices for that purpose be approved in form presented to this meeting, and that a copy of this vote be included with the minutes of this meeting.
Thank you, Ann. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Discussion on that. Are we all clear on that? Okay, all in favor of that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All opposed? Vanessa and Kim.
Abstain.
Oh, that's not allowed. No, you have to vote. No, you have to vote. Okay, there's 3 no's, Christina, Vanessa, and Kim. There's no reason to abstain on that. Okay, very good. Motion carries, thank you. All right, so 8C. Do we hear a motion?
I move that we vote to call referendum for issuance of school revolving renovation fund bond, approve the warrants and public hearing notices for that purpose.
I think you're going to read the...
I have to read the recommended vote. My apologies.
There you go.
Okay, I recommend that the vote entitled Vote to Call Referendum for Issuance of School Revolving Renovation Fund Bond and approve the warrants and public hearing notices for that purpose be approved in form presented to this meeting, and that a copy of this vote be included with the minutes of this meeting.
Thank you, Kim. Is there a second?
Yeah. Second.
Who was that? Tom?
Tom.
Tom. Thank you, Tom. Do we need an explanation on this? Scott, do you want to explain what we're doing here?
Sure. So the total project cost is $1,027,000. Obviously, $27,000 of that would be local funds. The $1 million would be done under the vote under this, which is $1 million, which is the maximum you can get in one of these priority areas for school revolving renovation funds. We would have forgiven almost $500,000 of that amount, and we would have to pay back about $500,000 of that amount at 0% interest. So again, it is like one of the commercials on TV that you used to see, you know, free money with the guy with the question marks all over him and stuff back in my day.
Well, sort of free money. We're passing it off to the state, to your point.
We are.
Yeah.
And we're all sort of paying it again.
Yeah, but the way I see it, the way I see it is somebody's going to get it, so we might as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Can I just quickly? So it says indoor air quality at the high school. Could we just give just a little quick snapshot of exactly what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. So what's going to happen at the high school is in the science wing, that was one of the areas that did not have the level of air exchange that it should have in that area. The math wing is the other wing that was questionable, but that one actually tested fine. So during that testing process, it was found that many of the range hoods in the science wing need upgrades. The HVAC in the building needs upgrades. So it'll be, I think, 3 rooftop ventilation units, and then it'll also add air conditioning to that wing of the building. So it'll be adding all those pieces, improving air quality, and also the air exchange in the bathrooms as well. Okay, will be improved by that. So that's kind of the nutshell of the project. So.
And can you also just go into a very brief history of why this is the project that we're choosing as opposed to using that $1 million some other way?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many ways in which you can use these school revolving renovation funds. So like, we've already gotten funds that we could for windows at Mabel I. Wilson School. So of that level, we don't qualify right now. However, for the level 1 improvements that they talk about under the school revolving renovation funds, we do qualify for. So these funds couldn't be used to go do and replace doors in the building, or, you know, a turf field, or, you know, any of the other projects that one might think of. They're very specific, and they're geared towards, you know, what you might consider life safety issues, okay, in the building. Sure.
Others? Okay. We all clear on what we're voting on? Any concerns? Okay. All in favor?
Did you have a second?
I did have a second, yep. Okay. Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you.
Great, okay. And Jason, could I add something? So the board, before you leave this evening, we have a number of warrant documents that need to be signed. So whether you voted yes or not, there's a number of documents that we need to sign this evening. So if you could stay at the end of the meeting so we could sign these warrants, and then
abstaining.
They'll be countersigned by the council and the selectmen tomorrow, and then they'll be posted in the community.
Okay, moving on to 8D. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve the appointment of professional positions as outlined.
Thank you, Ann. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Vanessa. Jeff, can you take us through the briefly?
Yep, this is a social work position, full-time at the Mabel I. Wilson School. It is to replace an existing social worker position, and it's replacing a person who has resigned. This person, the new person candidate that's being put forward is going to be starting at the beginning of the next school year. We do have a vacancy right now in the position. The person did resign before the end of the school year. However, we have moved some staffing around in order to cover the caseload for this person for the remaining 8 weeks of school. So we're okay, but this person will be starting at the beginning of the next school year.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Jeff, I just had one question. Do you know how many candidates were interviewed for this position?
Yeah, and I saw that that was blank, and I honestly don't, and I can email the board.
Okay. And I meant to ask you because I looked at this and I was like, oh, I should ask.
No, I saw that it was blank, and I've got to make a note again to myself to make sure that we have that information inputted on these forms, so I'm sorry about that.
Number interviewed, and we were doing for a while there total candidates as well, right?
Yes, and
that's helpful.
I'll talk to our staff about that.
Certainly to see the trends over time, that's helpful to see. Okay, other questions, concerns? Okay, all in favor? Unanimous, motion carries, thank you. All right, so we're moving on to a few deletions for policy. So is there a motion for 8E?
See Jared looking for it, so I'm going to jump ahead of you. To remove policy AB, community, staff, and student involvement in decision-making and communication with public as presented.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jared.
I was just going to ask, is there any reason could we take them all together? Are they all being deleted for similar reasons? Or we should take them separately?
Let's do this first one, and then the rest we can do together if there's no objections. How's that?
Great.
All right, Jared, briefly, we've already gone over this, but.
Okay, on AB specifically?
Yeah.
Okay, so just as a generally speaking, for I think all four of these policies, Drummond Woodsum has advised us that as a general rule, it's best to only have a policy if it's serving a particular purpose. And any policies we have, we are expected to be following. And that becomes more challenging as more policies are added over time. So for this reason, we periodically review our policies along with legal counsel to ensure that they're still serving a relevant purpose, or else we recommend them for deletion. Policy AB, which is community, staff, and student involvement in decision-making and communication to the public. And I'm sorry, I don't have the notes open from Drummond, but there's some redundancy in the policy, and the policy cross-references with BEHD, which was recently updated in 2020 and which is more comprehensive with its language about public participation. And so for that reason, policy AB was deemed to be unnecessary, and the committee agreed unanimously to recommend it for deletion.
Okay. We've hashed this out before. Is there anybody have any concerns for the questions? Okay. On this one item, AB, deleting it, all in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. So the other three, F, G, and H, I'm happy to take those as a group if somebody wants to do that.
I recommend to remove policy JO, employment of students as presented, to remove policy KFE, emergency use of school facilities as presented, and policy LDA, student teachers and internships.
Thank you, Vanessa. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jared. Discussion on these items. They're fairly straightforward. Anybody? Okay. All in favor? Unanimous, motion carries. Thank you. So we will move to superintendent's report. Jeff.
Yes, superintendent's report. There have been a lot of great things going on, even though we had a vacation. These things happened prior to the vacation, most of them. So I'll just kind of go through a few things. The ninth grade hosted an information night. This is the season where we have sixth grade and ninth grade and fourth grade information nights at kindergarten at some point as well. So we have a lot of things going on at the schools. That was one of them. So at Greeley High School, 5 high school students competed for the Thomas Cup, which is last weekend were named runners-up. Actually, it was 2 weekends ago. Quinn Richter, Liam Gordon, Drew Flanders, Brody Gifford, as well as former student Corbin Richter were members of Team Brazuker, I think is the name of it. But anyway, the Thomas Cup is a competition in science, technology, engineering, and innovation for the chance to win the Thomas Cup and receive scholarships to Thomas College. And there's a lot of areas involved: computer science, cyber defense, esports, crime analysis. So congratulations to that team. The math team went to a recent math meet. They are on a good trajectory this year. Here's someone familiar. On early April, Jack Chiazzo, Tommy Leggett-Barr, and Sam Carter competed in the Junior Achievement Titan competition at IDEX, and the team won the region and had a strong showing statewide.
Congrats,
Congratulations.
Tommy.
Thank you. Awesome. Also, congratulations Sophie Johnson, Jack Gervais, and Theo Perkins on their outstanding representation of Greeley at the All Eastern Honors Festival. At Greeley Middle School, 5th grade students have been working in art classes on cityscapes using a 1-point perspective. I actually joined one of their classes for a little bit, and just amazing the level of detail that the students were looking at and using exemplars of cities and being able to kind of replicate in their own perspective what they were able to see. And it was a particular skill the art teacher was teaching about 1-point perspective. 8th graders paired up with 4th graders. We have a lot of buddy arrangements in the district where older students work with younger students. This is one example, and this was a recent buddy session. Also at Greeley Middle School, they had Spirit Week before the break. Theme days included business casual, Greeley gear, Western, blackout, and neon. Neon's my favorite. Look at that. Back to the 70s. Let's do it. March is Nutrition Awareness Month. 4th and 5th graders used movement to explore My Plate, identify food items into groups in PE class. Congratulations to all the Greeley Special Olympians who attended the Cumberland County Special Olympics swim meet in early April at Cape Elizabeth High School. Always a great event every year for these students and staff. Grade 4-5 students walked to the Art Center to hear from Joshua Kennison. I had a chance to join this as well, international Paralympic athlete from Maine, right here from Maine. Grew up in Maine, went to school here in Maine, went on to really accomplish an amazing thing considering that he has no limbs. He was born with no limbs, no chin, and no tongue, and had reconstructive surgery when he was young on his chin and his tongue, and is able to speak today. But he overcame a huge amount of physical disabilities, amazing attitude. Just the message he had for the kid just sitting there gave me goosebumps. I mean, the kids were completely fixated on him, and several students asked questions at the end into the microphone and asked him questions, and he just had such an amazing way of just talking about this as if it is something, really talking not just about disabilities, but life in general, and that you should, think of those. This is the one thing that stuck with me. Think of those 5 things that you are thankful for, and just keep coming back to those 5 things over and over again. That not all life is roses and cherries. A lot of it's hard, but think of those 5 things that really make you happy. And it was a great message, I think, for the kids. Students in 4th grade created a history walking museum. Amazing. Had a guided tour from some students, a group of students. On this, there's topics like civil rights, immigration, Underground Railroad, women's rights, Holocaust, South African apartheid. I'm sure I'm missing some, but just amazing museum that spanned the entire 4th and 5th grade wing. Kids were really proud of their work and really well-spoken when they were giving me that tour, and I know they gave many people a tour during that week. At Mabel I. Wilson School, Connie Russell's third grade class presented their animal research projects to families and staff. And I don't know if there's any families and staff included in this particular. I always like to see if there's anyone.
My family's
I was going to say, I didn't know if anyone wanted to speak up.
Yeah, my little buddy's in there.
I was going to say, somebody looks familiar. So that was something that went on recently. Crystal Gagnon's kindergarten class walked to GMS. Again, another one of those buddy examples. We see a lot of these this time of year. They went over for book buddies with Jordan Driscoll's fourth graders. MIW's Student Playground Committee met and came up with some great ideas. In fact, I met with one of these students to get some ideas about our playground as well. They have some amazing ideas, and honestly, a lot of them are probably going to be implemented. And we also have an adult playground committee as well. But there's two committees working on this and melding those ideas together. Mabel I. Wilson students were introduced to the school's annual Kindness Challenge. This is an annual event, really festive assembly. This was half of the students. We have 2 different assemblies given the size of the school, but encouraging students to be involved in random acts of kindness, and that's all this week. Is that celebration. And I have another section called Rangers Rock, Encore Edition. And Margaret Corral is a Spanish teacher at the high school, and she was awarded, kind of as a surprise, she was given the Greeley Staff Cup. And I know there's another word for it, and I can't think of it right now, but she received this. This is a relatively new award for staff at the high school that was started by Mr. Francis, the principal, and the first recipient was Susan Inman, who really gave a moving speech before then passing it along to Margaret Corral. And the kids celebrated with her after she got the award. Evan Christensen is the first winner of the Principal for an Hour raffle from MIW's Math and Literacy Night. I had a chance to talk to her on the phone. She was principal just for an hour, so I had a short window here, but I had a chance to talk to her on the phone, asked her what she had learned, said that she had learned a lot about how to be a principal, and I asked her if she wanted to be a principal someday, and she said, I'm thinking about it. So that's great. I said, well, we're going to need some principals in the future, so think about it. She did a great job keeping everyone in shape and in line. Greeley High School junior Elizabeth Anderton is releasing her own novel. She's a junior. On April 28th this week. Her novel is Heroes of the Flame, Rise of Phoenix. Follows a young girl navigating the pressures of high school along with some unexpected powers. And that's pretty cool, a book cover there. We have a lot of books that are coming up. Here's another one. Scotty Wenzel and his mom and dad. Scotty just left us at the high school after many years being in our district, and was involved in a book that is really written about him, A Dog and His Boy. And so it's the reverse of what we usually think of, A Dog and His Boy. And he was able to share that book that was written about him and his dog with Mrs. Follett's and Mrs. McFarland's classes at GMS 4-5. And Andrew Fresh is our Pathways coordinator at the high school, and he has also written a book recently, a children's book. It's about the piping plovers at Higgins Beach, and there was a huge controversy years ago where the federal government had to step in and make sure the piping plovers were protected at Higgins Beach, and he's written a children's book about that. So a lot of books getting written around here. Also, spring sports. We've had here's a bunch of pictures from lacrosse to baseball to softball. And I had a chance to see a Greeley baseball game last week. They happened to be playing Scarborough, and I won't tell you what the score was, but anyway. And then I'd like to talk about the new field house restrooms. This is something that has been in the works for a while. Got completed last week, just in time for the spring season, and will be open to the public during for whatever events are open. So these are our bathrooms that have been completed. Thank you to Doughton's Construction for that, and also Story Brother. We had a lot of people working on this project. I can't remember all of them.
We had Story, and also the town of Cumberland helped us out with some of the sewer and water.
Thank you to the town as well for that. But this has been something that a lot of people have wanted for a long, long, long time, is having bathrooms you don't have to go into the high school to use, and be right at an event, not have to leave too far, and especially for kids, not having to wander into a school and parents have to worry about that. So having these, I think, will be a huge asset as we have games and events on our fields pretty much all year. Well,
It's also got an adjoining bathroom to the weight room, which hasn't existed before. So they can go right from the weight room even during the winter months and access the bathrooms. And then we displace the snack shack, and that's what we're looking at rebuilding again this summer.
Yeah, the students that use the weight room were very excited to be able to use the bathroom because we didn't have one out there.
Yeah.
But it will be used by hopefully a lot of different people, public, when they're visiting our events, students, etc. So thank you for all of this work, and again, Scott, for making sure it got done. So that's the superintendent's report.
Could I ask a question about the restrooms?
Sure.
Are they just restrooms? Are they just like anybody can use either one? They're not labeled. It's not a political question. It's just simply one gender doesn't want to wait a long time in a line while the other one's empty.
Yes, they are.
They're just
Yes, they're just restrooms.
Thank you.
Yeah,
They are
they're
just
just
restrooms,
restrooms,
and there's
One
3 of
tomorrow.
them. There are actually 3. There are 3.
No, that doesn't surprise you.
And I don't know if anybody ever remembers the porta potties that we had such trouble with up there. This is really going to make a big difference. So,
Not the porter potties, as Scott says sometimes.
I call them the porter potties.
The porter potties, the porta potties. Different, very different.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. All right, so any questions of Jeff before we move on? Okay. So committee reports, first is finance. I think we've beat that horse.
We have.
Yeah.
But I did want to thank Tom for taking the lead when you guys had the joint committee, and I wasn't able to be there. And I watched the whole thing, and I think the whole board did a great job with all the questions, and we really educated both towns on what we do and how we're trying to not just give everybody the world, but and I think it was really good that Bill Shane also, it seemed like he came to light on what we really need as a district. And I think those meetings are very helpful. And I want to thank Tom again for taking the charge on that. And Kim.
Yeah, I thought it was a great meeting also. One of the best discussions I think we've had between the 3 bodies. Okay, moving on. Policy, Jared, maybe take us through these. It looks like some of them you can group together and gloss over. We've been through before.
Yeah, so, okay, so the first one is policy JICA, student dress. And this was introduced to the policy committee by Don Gray and Richard Taylor. And they introduced a member of our representative from our student government, Callie. And I don't know the full background, but I think initially someone on the student government raised a concern about this policy to Mr. Taylor. I think essentially it started with provision F, which is clothing that is unduly revealing and which detracts in any way from the educational program is prohibited. The concern that was raised was that this is broad, difficult to enforce, and that it seemed to, by its nature, only target female students and more so than male students. And the concern that was raised to Mr. Taylor was that it just didn't seem fair. And he said, well, if we're going to raise this with the policy committee, why don't we first go through and compare this policy to policies of other nearby schools and just see are there other provisions that could be more up to date, other recommendations we can make. And so the student or students did a comprehensive analysis of this provision against other ones that have been updated more recently. They made some additional recommendations. I think Mr. Taylor and Don Gray weighed in. and then ultimately presented something, I believe, to Jeff and the administration, who may have weighed in as well, but then also sent it to Drummond Woodsum for their feedback, and then it made its way to the policy committee. We thought the student who presented this made some good points, and didn't have any concerns with any of the other recommendations, and thought it generally left enough discretion to the school and the administration if they saw a dress that or clothing that would substantially disrupt school activities or interfere with the rights or safety of others. There's still the ability for the school to step in and do something about that, but it leaves a lot of discretion and judgment to the administration. And otherwise, we felt that the recommendations generally made sense, and so the policy committee unanimously voted to send it to the board for a first read. Happy to take any questions.
One point on E, it really should be clothing is, not clothing are, is not. Just grammar here.
Yeah, that looks right. Yeah, that looks
It should
right
be
to
is
me.
because it's crossed out.
Did you get that, Jeff? Or I don't know what the
Are you
provision-
you're on E? The old E or the new E?
They have just the draft.
Is not permitted.
Clothing, footwear, insignia, or accessories that are intended?
No,
Is that the one?
Under E, clothing that is destructive of school property. Blah, blah,
Oh,
blah,
okay,
Should be is not permitted?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, good point.
Out of curiosity, how did you decide when to use the word permitted versus impermissible versus prohibited?
That didn't come up in the discussion, so I don't know if Jeff, if you want to weigh in on that, or
I would not be able to give you a background on that one. No, I think it's just, can you say that again? Maybe that's why I can't give you a background.
It typically said prohibited in B, prohibited in C, and then D says are permissible and not permitted. So it's not consistent in the language of,
I think that was in the original policy,
Yeah.
that's why. It was just language that was already there and it was just carried through. There's no rhyme or reason to it.
Probably use the same language, though.
I think that's a
Yeah.
good point, though.
Is
yeah.
prohibited is probably the one that's used the most often.
yeah. Most of our policies will say prohibited.
Right.
So
It's gonna be R.
Are prohibited.
So that would
My
apply
friend's
to
down here at the
D,
end.
E.
No, E is.
For G, footwear should be worn at all times. Is there a reason that that should rather than must or is required?
It says,
Footwear should.
doesn't it say should?
Yeah, but should leaves an interpretation. I should eat healthy. I'm just wondering if
Shall, you want shall?
No, you
Am I
must.
talking about M, Kim?
No,
G.
G, okay.
I feel like that leaves room for somebody to take their shoes off, even though they should be on.
I guess the only thing is I'm thinking for that though is like when they have like swimming and PE and that, like obviously you're not wearing
Okay.
shoes when you're swimming.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
I don't know, but I hear what you're
Yeah,
questioning.
I could go either way on that one.
Should is generally optional and shall is an edict, I think, no?
I think it's should or must. You must stop at the stop
Yeah,
sign.
should is
You should stop at
suggestive
the
and
stop
must
sign.
is
I
better
mean,
do
the
it.
shoe thing, I
So-
don't know. I mean, yeah, shoes should be worn, but if they come off once in a while.
Okay, well, so maybe we can forward these things to Jared to integrate these small edits.
I have a question that isn't wordsmithing. It's so. Were there any examples given for what constitutes substantially disrupting school activities?
So that's the in the law and the courts have often used that phrasing, and that's why it's probably in here. Whenever they've talked about when an administrator can act on something, whether it's clothing that is, clothing that's getting disruptive to others, it's usually substantial disruption. It can't just be, I don't like what you're wearing. It has to be something where it's really causing attention, it's causing the learning environment to be disrupted, or the school environment. And that's usually what the courts have said, and they're not a lot more, they're about as vague as that when it comes down to its interpretation.
So it's commonly accepted
Yes.
discretion that's given to administrators.
Right.
Okay.
I think it's, and courts have given specifics, like it can't just be one or two people that don't like it or whatnot, but it has to be something where the administrator looks at it and says, yeah, this is this is disruptive. Now, that is outside of the purview of hate speech or anything like that. That is automatic. I mean, we automatically don't allow that. But it's other things that might be political or something that's just a little bit off the cuff that somebody may not like, as long as it's not causing attention from several people and causing people to talk about it and causing the learning environment to be disrupted, the administrator can make that decision and say, that's not working today, that kind of thing. But most of the time, administrators, and this is the discussion we had at policy, don't want to be in that position where we're judging people's attire. And I think that's where, Mr. Gray, the student as well, and Mr. Taylor were saying, we don't want to, go around policing people's, attire. I think 50 years ago, schools did that a lot. You have to, or even 30 years ago, that happened. We've really gotten away from that, as long as it's not causing disruption. We're not going to tell people what to wear and what not to wear,
I just had one other comment too. I know this policy came through policy committee last year, and at the time I wrestled with this same thought in regards to E and noting change that can scratch furniture. And I'm just wondering if there's a way, I don't know, I'm also like thinking back to myself as a high schooler. I was someone who wore a chain wallet, that was not something that would scratch furniture. I think there's different levels of individual expression versus what could be disruptive. And I wonder if there's a way to kind of balance that a bit more in terms of.
Yeah, we do. I mean, I will say we do have students that will wear jewelry, that's large jewelry or whatever, and we generally, that's fine, as long as it's not being used for any other purpose, but it's just something that their attire has that in it. I think I would say staff use their discretion on these things, but generally students are not asked not to wear that stuff, as long as it's appropriate and it's not doing anything. I think the biggest one, and it does specifically say cleats. Cleats will destroy the floors, and if you have a whole group of kids on cleats, we even have a sign at the middle school, please don't, because kids forget and they come in with their cleats all the time. So we have to, make sure that it doesn't happen, but they just destroy it's really that kind of destruction. It's not having some sort of a chain that you were suggesting that, it's going to scratch a chair or something. That's just not, I can't see us saying you can't wear that. I don't think that's what it meant.
And this came primarily from the students. It was a student that, or wasn't it?
It went to student government.
Yeah, it went to student government, and they came back with this verbiage.
Yeah, and some of it was here, and then some of it they changed.
Yep.
Yep.
So I'm sorry.
No.
I have one last question on B. The part that was crossed out, was that crossed out by the Drummond lawyers, suggested it was too wordy and just use the word any gang is prohibited? I asked because gang is interpretable.
It's a pejorative term, yeah.
Well, but also it's I mean, Peanuts was a gang. I mean, if someone wants to be fussy, I mean, so I don't, no, but really, I mean, this will come back and haunt you if we don't deal with it now.
I think it comes back to the substantial disruption, and again, the hate speech. If it's a gang where there's hate being discussed or written, that's off limits right away.
I agree with you. So that's how it's delineated there in the part that's crossed out, though. So don't we want to keep that, or were the lawyers saying that's just too wordy?
Well, I think that part that was crossed out though was moved to C. So there's a difference. B is just in terms of like any sort of illegal gang that, and then C is specifically anything else.
I
mean, all of
agree.
the above.
I do
all of
see
the
it
other.
there, yes, but I still worry about that word just gang just hanging there. Like, that hasn't been defined, and so we're gonna let anyone define that, or?
I mean, having been a principal what is a gang? A gang is a group of people that hang out. Could be
Yeah.
a group of friends that hang out. They call themselves a gang sometimes at the elementary level or whatnot. Just, hey, join our gang or whatever. Try not to use that language and try to help kids with other language, but I see what you're saying on that.
Does C actually cover it without having to say gang, or should we call gang out? I think calling gang out by itself could represent other things.
Yeah, the word gang I'm stuck on that word. Like, can we find another word? Or combine B and C somehow?
I think it was combined, wasn't it, Jared? And then they pulled it apart.
Yes.
They did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
And I don't know the full background as to why that was separated.
Yeah, I'm not sure of that either.
So these are examples, but the underlying, from what I understood in policy, was if it distracts.
Right.
And these are just examples that potentially could deemed as a distraction.
Right.
That the administrators would call out. So it's, and like, but the underlining is it a distraction? Because I asked, is there like, when we went to school, you put your hand down, your shorts can't be shorter than where the tip of your finger, and there isn't. Can a girl go to school in a bra? She can. I mean, it depends who's interpreting it as distract.
Yeah, I mean, this is, even though it feels like we're trying to create some boundaries that we can fall into, at the end of the day, it's up to an administrator to interpret this too and just say, is that appropriate or not? And is it distracting? Is it causing a problem in the school? And if it is, administrators have to use their discretion. It gives examples of this. I think the word gang, when this policy was first on the books back in 2000, that word probably had a very different meaning than it might today even. Maybe not. I think everybody's got a way of interpreting that word.
I think it's worth at least just thinking about the usage of the word, but I do think that the inclusion of in a dress code of prohibition of gang-related colors is really important, and it's helped prevent violence in many school districts, and also just exclusion and other things like this. So we don't want to lose that at all. So I'd be fine if taking a glance at it, but I'm not so sure I'd be comfortable removing this unless we have a really good reason. Also, I'm going to wear a Snoopy t-shirt the next one.
I'm just thinking we just need to define gang a little bit, like any illicit gang, any violent gang, any, you know what I mean? Just the word
Gang is
itself, just
understood
words.
to be a violent, or is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I do think the word gang is way open for interpretation, and I think it would be difficult, especially if you're saying even wearing colors. Well, sometimes people are wearing colors for a different reason. They have nothing to do with being a gang. It's just that they're making a statement or whatever. We wouldn't want to interpret that as being a gang and then say you can't do it. So I think it is. I think it may be a word that we have to ask more about.
Just explore that more. I'd love that. Thank you.
When the administration talked to us as a student government, they talked about how they practice dress coding, particularly, and how it's kind of evolved. And they said they really don't punish students anymore. Instead, just ask them, will you please change out of the clothes that you are wearing, and provide them with a change of clothes. So it's really it's not like the students that would fall under any of these categories would receive a detention or be any way punished. It's more just if the administrators use their discretion, and if they believe that it falls under any of these categories, they just ask, like, will you please change, and just have a conversation about, like, what is appropriate for school. So it's, yeah, I don't know if reading into the word gang specifically, this was also a discussion that we had with student government, given that gang, like, how many gangs are you really finding in Cumberland, Maine? So it's like kind of a an interesting thing that was in the policy to begin with. But when we talked to the administrators, they said that that was definitely something that they desired to include.
Well, right, and I think if anything, like, it's more like perhaps we would maybe have students who are putting on that performance as if, like, they're, like, connecting themselves with that gang, even if they're not actually in it. I don't know. And that's obviously something, a conversation that would happen then too between administration and the student as to why they're making that decision to identify themselves with.
I just wanted to say I really appreciated the process of student government
Yes.
reviewing and making recommendations, and I would love to see more of that. I don't know how often it's happened previously, but I think I really value their input on this.
Yeah, usually once a year, we have student government weigh in on a policy that they're really interested in. And so I thinking about once a year, we'll hear from them.
Great.
Yeah.
One more question. Oh, sorry.
Just on this point, I don't have a strong feeling either way. I can see Christina's point that it's a little bit vague. I think there's trade-offs. If we make it more specific, if we leave it as is, it's giving more discretion to the administration for when they actually want to call on this provision, if they see fit, which could be a good thing if you're trusting in the administration. At the same time, if we want to rein it in and get more specific, we can. That just sort of takes a little bit of discretion away from the administration, and it could really go either way. We can certainly ask Drummond Woodson if they've got other language that they have used elsewhere that they would recommend.
And Carl was Carl Francis, correct?
Yep.
He was very happy with the way this policy had come out and how he could use it as a tool.
That's right.
Yeah, he was very happy. We had a lot of these questions that came up in the policy meeting, and he just always reverted back to the broader, it makes their job easier.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
To deal with each individual situation.
Is there a reason that, for example, policy C, that does not include at-school sponsored activities as well? The only time that school-sponsored activities is specified is for alcohol, drug, and tobacco use. Just wondering if that was a conscious choice.
Why it doesn't say that, Kim? Because it still is in there.
Well, like C says, clothing that would advocate for violence or disruption of the school's instructional program is prohibited. Does that mean that such clothing could be worn at a school-sponsored activity? Because there was a need apparently to specify that in A for tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. So I was just wondering if that was a...
No, it should be, it would be prohibited at any school activities.
Yeah.
Perhaps that should be moved to the intro then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anything with this policy applies to anything that has to do with school-related.
Yeah, but do you see it? Because that was added
Right.
to A, so I just wondered why that was felt necessary to be added.
Yep.
Okay, so I guess putting it all together, if the only correction we had was E, which was changing R to is, I would have almost thought we could have maybe done that on the fly. I don't know, but we seem to have two other, one and possibly two other questions. I think that that Kim's point, unless I'm missing something, seems to be a good one. I mean, that provision in A should really be moved to the preamble. I think
can it
is,
just
Right.
be added after and the word enforced right before that? Shall be enforced at school-sponsored activities? In that very end of the preamble.
Or worn on school grounds
Oh, there's
when school is in session, or at school-sponsored activities or school functions, like maybe just that whole
I must have missed that
section.
Maybe we should, Jared, for the sake of time, look at those at school-sponsored activities and at school functions, put it in the main paragraph.
Yeah.
And tweak it and then just kind of list out, like, they're prohibited, all these are prohibited at school activities, sponsored school events, in that main paragraph, and then it will eliminate a lot of wordsmithing, A through G.
Agreed. No, I
Yeah.
think that's what Ann was suggesting
Yeah,
too, and I think that
that's
makes
what I
sense.
thought, okay.
But
Instead
I
of
think
sitting
we'll
here
have
and
to.
trying to wordsmith A through G.
Yeah, yeah. And if we're going to do those two changes anyway, we could also, Jeff, maybe ask Drummond Woodsum or just
Yep,
relay
I will.
Christina's concern about.
The gang.
Yes,
what
I
is it?
will.
I've got a million windows. open
Policy
here, so-
person at Drummond Whitson retired, so we'll be going to one of the attorneys now on this.
Great.
They've
So
not filled the position.
So these potential changes, does this mean we'll have to come back to first read, or?
I don't think it can, well, it certainly won't come back next week. We won't have time. So I would think it might need to go to policy, back to policy.
Okay.
I think
All
that's
right.
right.
So if anybody has anything further after review, send it to Jared, and we'll start over a little bit. And bring it
Jeff,
back
I'll
again.
put this into one email to you, my notes from this, that you can
Yep.
maybe review with Drummond Woodsum all at the same time.
Yep,
And
that'd
we'll
be great.
probably just have to touch base with the student government.
Yeah, we'll probably have to circle back with them and make
Yep.
sure that they're okay with whatever.
The broad
Or they're
strokes.
at least coming to the meeting.
Yeah.
Invited back to the meeting.
Sounds good. Okay. So, Jason, on to the next section or the next
Yeah,
provisions?
the next one
I
would
think-
be a group, right?
Yeah, so the next one, 10B, 2 little I, and to 10B, little Roman numeral 7. All 6 of these are being updated because there's been a change in the recommended definition of, I guess, persons for whom it's prohibited to bully. I guess you really can't bully anyone, but this all started in looking at policy JICK, and there's specific prohibited behavior for bullying anyone based on certain criteria. And when we had a question for Drummond Woodsum, and they noticed that this provision was using outdated language, and so they put in new recommended language. I'll just read it for one, and it applies throughout all 6 of these provisions. So, for example, bullying includes but is not limited to a written, oral, or electronic expression, or a physical act or gesture, or any combination thereof directed at a student or students that, and then number 3, is based on a student's actual or perceived race, including traits associated with race involving hair texture, afro hairstyles, and protective hairstyles such as braids, twists, and locks, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, ancestry, or natural origin, age, familial status, disability, or genetic information, or any other distinguishing characteristic. So that is the recommended language from Drummond Woodsum, and they've replaced it every place it was relevant in our various policies, including the 6 that are listed in the agenda that were recommended for first read tonight.
I'm
Questions on that
scanning
for
through.
Jared?
Does this specify only on school campus during school hours, or is this at any point, like if this happened over the summer, would it be considered a violation of the policy? Or
This is a JICK specifically.
I apologize because I'm not
That's a more general question. That's come up before, Jeff.
It is, and it's a hard question. The general, and I'm speaking generally only right now without any specific situation in mind, but generally speaking, if it happens off of school grounds, out of school hours, it's generally not the schools unless it spills into the school and begins to affect a student's educational program or their ability to come to school and feel safe at school. If those things start to arise, then the administration does have an obligation to get involved, even if it happened off school grounds, out of school hours, and that's based on court decisions that have been made.
Okay.
And so generally we're hands off, even if it's on social media or something like that, unless it's impacting a student's ability to access their education. And once it does that, then it becomes an obligation to the school to then look into it if there's a complaint.
Okay. So Jeff, as part of that, would the title then be, should it be bullying and cyberbullying of students in schools and school-sponsored or school-related events? Because like a sports event?
Usually when it says in schools, I mean, it's inferred that it applies to anything to do with the school. So whether it's a school event, it could be an away game, with our team. Usually when it says in schools, it's applying, it already infers that.
Okay, gotcha.
Anything associated with the school. That's a pretty broad base there, whether it's a school bus stop, whatever.
Other questions generally on that group?
So just to confirm, the only change was the update in that definition, which is in blue in all of the various policies, except for, I want to call it J-I-C-K. There's just a few other changes in red.
Right.
But for the other ones, the only thing that's changed was the swap of the new definition in blue.
Yes.
Okay. So for the additional changes for JIC, so there was in the title of it was changed to add of students.
And that was done on purpose because we have a policy that has to do with staff.
Okay, thank you.
We have our own staff bullying policy that is separate, and that was approved by the board a couple of years ago.
Okay. And then there's one other change in red that I appreciated because what was written before didn't make as much sense of knowingly making a false accusation of bullying behavior. That was just a rewrite.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it didn't make a lot of sense.
Oh.
Yeah, and then Leanne, there was one other change in red, which is Roman numeral 3B, where Drummond Woodson recommended not trying to define cyberbullying so specifically, but to leave it more broad.
Because we find all new ways, right?
Yes, it changes.
There'll always be
it
new
changes
ways,
all
right?
the time.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So do we just move on with this?
Yeah,
the next
please
section?
move on
Okay.
to 8 and 9, please.
Okay, so then policy, I think JID and JLD. Let me just make sure I'm, yes, okay. So we had initially had these on the list. They were initially proposed to consider deleting, and then in the process of going through them and asking some questions, it became clear that Jeff wanted to follow up and on a couple of considerations. And he went back to Drummond Woodson and then came back to the committee again, and Jeff explained that Drummond Woodson, he'd asked Drummond Woodson about these policies, and they reassured him that they were not needed policies. There were higher governing bodies that, I guess, regulate the issues that are meant to be covered by those policies, and so they're not necessary to have as a policy. And that was really it. I didn't have another reason, essentially, but just that they were not needed because both of the issues addressed by both policies were already covered by essentially higher, governing law. essentially.
I think the question mark that came up was that part in red. That was the part I checked with Drummond and Woodson about, is when a student turns 18, and let's just say they don't want their parents to have access to their records anymore. We have a number of 18-year-olds in high school, and occasionally this issue will come up, but if a parent claims the child as a dependent, this is where that higher governing law, which is federal, claims the child as a dependent, they have rights to those records and information. A student can't, when they're 18, second they're 18, say, I don't want my parents seeing anything. If the parents, and this is part of the IRS code, if they were claimed as a dependent on the taxes from the previous year, they are a dependent, and therefore the parents have rights. And so I was checking with Drummond and Woodson just to make sure at first that was still accurate, and two, do we need to have this, as a policy? And they said no. This is a law, so you don't have to worry about it.
And then for JLD, Drummond and Woodson said that there was a new law passed in 2019, which includes requirements regarding counselors and social workers, and that also requires the Maine Department of Education to promulgate rules concerning counselors and counseling programs, and those rules have not yet been drafted, but that would essentially preempt or remove the need to for us to have a policy on it.
Yeah, and again, the question mark that came up was the very last paragraph, dealing with counseling and guidance responsibilities. Again, I checked with Drummond and Woodson on that. And it had to do with the counseling relationship, and that just about all of relationship between a counselor and student is protected. It's confidential information, privileged. There are exceptions that are built into the law where a counselor has to report something, whether it's, should be to the administrator first of the school, could be a Department of Human Services. There are certain exceptions that if it's a safety issue, that is a bona fide safety issue, they would have to disclose that information, and that is governed by law. So Drummond Woodson again was saying you don't need to have this policy.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Other questions before we move on? Okay, facilities, Mike, Ann, others?
The only thing I have to add is that we're going to be meeting next week, especially given the successful vote to put the Wyatt land up for referendum. We need to go through and give some clearer, I think, indications of potential uses and start really thinking that through, as well as updates on the short-term facility plan, given the amount of work that's going to be happening this summer.
And did you want to add anything?
No, one thing that I hope we can also put on there too is the building walkthroughs for facility committees.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Scott, anything to add?
Yeah, the only other piece that I would add is that tomorrow night or tomorrow evening we go to the planning board in Cumberland with the two parts of our short-term plan on the modulars. We also have to have the portico for the shade over to Mabel I. Wilson School on there, and also the snack shack will be on there. So, but we're doing the 2-year plan before the planning board tomorrow night. So
we won't have to go back again.
We won't have to go back again. It all gets done in one fell swoop. So.
And are you anticipating any issues?
Not at this time. No. I mean, there's always a surprise, right?
I'm familiar with those folks. Oh. All right, very good. Moving on, curriculum, Tom?
We had a meeting a couple weeks ago where we talked about the new middle school math curriculum, and also I had a conversation about looping. And unfortunately, I forgot my notes. So if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. But I think there was some interest in looping, so I will say that we had a good conversation. I think everybody's in favor of looping, and it's going to continue. The bigger issues are, how does it fit into our long-term academic planning? Like, will we always have teachers available to do this? And then how do we plan professional development around that?
And I would just add to that conversation about looping. It was discussed that we should probably have more communication about how it's done, who does it, when things are decided, and how all that's communicated. Because I think there were some recent concerns regarding that.
Yep, I think what transpired there was a learning experience for sure. Yep.
Were any teachers who are currently looping teachers involved in the committee meeting?
No. Jeff and Susie Robbins represented the administration.
Yeah, and I think the discussion was if we're going to talk about looping and options for students, that there would be another meeting down the road to talk about all of that, and then we'd invite teachers who are involved in that as part of that discussion. But kind of looking at options for all students, I think, is how we also talked about at the end, you know, whether it's teaming or looping or multi-age, or kind of at the elementary level, what are those options that that we offer in our district? And at that point, we would be inviting people in to talk more about that.
I'd like to add to that conversation of looping. You know, I'm pleased with how it turned out, that we're going to continue doing that. And 2 of my kids looped, and one of them in particular, it was a wonderful thing because it was a very warm teacher, and my child needed that at that point in their life. I think it's worth pointing out, though, you know, to keep in mind as we plan for this, if we do more looping, that's not always going to be the case. I mean, I think we hear the positive stories, but occasionally there would be the child that doesn't fit in with the class and clashes with the teacher. So, you know, I think that would
They
be...
have the option to move.
Yep, right. But I just want to make sure that's well defined and that kid isn't sort of ostracized, and that we try to accommodate that as best as possible, because getting them out of that class might be the best thing for them as well.
I guess I just want to clarify that, yes, looping is continued in the 1 grade, but not all that were going on before. So it's not completely restored or completely being done as it was for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, there were. I will say, after all the dust was settled on that, there were attempts to get some other teachers interested at this point. But I think we're going to, and there were teachers that were asked if they wanted to loop, who had shown interest. But it was, I think, a little bit too late in the season at this point to have teachers think that way. I think we have to think long-term about looping. I think we have to think long-term about multi-age. We currently have no multi-age per se that we're offering, and we used to offer multi-age at the Wilson School. We also have teaming. That's another option, but we have a lot of teaming going on. But is that an option for all kids? I think this is a conversation that would be a great curriculum committee discussion, and I would absolutely, to Ann's point, we definitely want to bring teachers in, we want to bring administrators in at the outset and just kind of have that discussion with people, and I think it's a very healthy discussion.
I appreciate that the discussion from a curriculum standpoint happened, and you said some things were learned. What about how it was communicated to parents and staff? Has that particular piece of this been addressed?
You know, I'll take that on. I'll take the communication on, because I think Tom raised a good point at the curriculum meeting. And I think this is something we have to work with all of our administrators on, is when there's a curriculum shift of any kind, of a long-standing, especially a long-standing practice or approach in education that we're using, it should go to the curriculum committee. And the curriculum committee is mostly an advisory committee, although they've got teeth if they want to say no, yes, or whatever, and then forward a recommendation to the board. But at least it's a vetting place for any sort of shift. And that's something that, quite honestly, I should have seen that and advised that needs to come to curriculum. And that wasn't something that happened. So I will take that on. The curriculum committee absolutely should have heard that discussion prior to any decision being made, because it is a very long-standing practice in our district. So I will take that one on, and I think you know, there's certain things that come up. We're trying to funnel these to the curriculum committee when these things come up, and that is the role of the curriculum committee in our district. So
thank you for that.
Definitely.
A question, Jeff. Teachers are not forced to go into a looping situation, right?
No. No, it's all voluntary. They're not forced to do that. Multi-age was the same way. It was teachers that wanted to be involved in that, in the multi-age. Those teachers have retired. Well, one of them is not retired, but has changed positions, and then 2 have retired. So sometimes by attrition, these things fall off and then are gone. But it doesn't mean that our practices need to be. We should just be looking at, are there other options, and who should be training. And of course, we had a lot of COVID to deal with for a while, but I think it's something, it is an important conversation. It's something we should be talking about.
Coming from a family of teachers, I know one of them had expressed to me before that they had looped and they just didn't want to do another loop. It's a bigger commitment, and they were ready to take a year off from it or whatever.
Yeah,
So.
and teachers, we get to that point and they absolutely can say, I need a break. And we have teachers that will take a break a year or 2 and then go back to it. And then say, I'm ready to do it again. And that's totally fine, and we've always handled it that way. They're not forced to do looping.
Okay. Anything else for curriculum?
One other thing that I wanted to add regarding the middle school math curriculum, I was really impressed with the time and care that everybody involved put into selecting a new middle school math curriculum. The presentation was extremely thoughtful, and they arrived at a curriculum that, and correct me, it's Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That it I think does a great job of providing feedback that gives different opportunities for interventions with students, and does a good job of reaching students at different performance levels. So I think they arrived at a really good place.
It was a great presentation. That was one curriculum meeting I sat in on, and it was a really great presentation on the math, and they seemed very excited.
Yes.
And the woman that's leading it is very knowledgeable. I forget her name, but she was extremely knowledgeable about the math programs, all of them, and the pros and cons.
Very good. Others? Anything else for curriculum? Okay. Moving on to equity. Jared, any updates?
Okay, so I'll give a quick update, and then I'll invite Kim and see if she wants to add to it in any way. So the good news is that the committee's been very hard at work on a plan pursuant to policy ACA. We've divided into 2 subcommittees, essentially. We've divided the committee into 2 halves. One half is working on policies and protocols and academics and programming. The other half that I'm involved in is working on student development and participation, as well as family and community engagement. So the good news is we're hard at work. We've been meeting every other week to push this along, and I think it's very thorough and comprehensive, particularly compared to some of the other plans that we had seen from other districts. I'd say the less good news, well, the good part about that is everyone wants to contribute, and I think it's been a very inclusive process. I think the more that everyone gets involved, the better it's ultimately, the better it gets, and we keep improving it, essentially. The only downside to that is it's taking a long time, so we're going to need to really make a push, I would say, in May, if we're going to have something ready to prepare to present to the board this year. I think we'll work very hard to do that. I feel like some of these sections are getting close, but we now need to come together and kind of each half has to present their half to the full committee, and then there'll be a lot to hash out. So we're going to need to make a big push in May to get this along, and but I feel like we've got a lot of really good stuff in here. I don't know if Kim, if there's anything you'd like to add about the process or the content.
Yeah, well, just I think that to be able to structure it this way has given us such a great springboard to talk about specific things, but with regard to the way the plan is coming together, it's really given us that framework that I think just everything comes back to how to implement the plan, but with the freedom to also have some more philosophical discussions. But I do feel like this has been crucial to moving the plan forward, and I think it'll be very interesting to see once this plan is finished by us, hopefully approved by the board, what next year's equity committee can then do with this plan, and how they can take it and continue the
agree.
work.
I think
So.
it's going to be a fun and interesting committee next year. I mean, this year we're meeting to discuss the plan, but there's a lot of components to this that will make this really interesting next year. So, for example, in the same way that we have public comment right now as a full board, this plan calls for essentially at each meeting of the equity committee, we would be inviting a different group from the school, whether it's a civil rights team or the ADL League partnership, or else it could be a building administrator or the librarians to present to the equity committee, or invite them to present to the equity committee just an update on what they're doing that's related to, I guess, programs that further the goals of Policy ACA. And so the committee will essentially be in an oversight position to know what's happening in the district and be in a position to report back to the full board about what's going on. And I think those will make for very interesting meetings and interesting discussions. So that's what's going on. I feel good about what's happening here. We have a lot of work, though, to get over the finish line. So,
Well, and similar, like Jeff, what you were saying about, if 2 teachers retire and they were the only ones doing multi-age, do you have a policy or a plan saying multi-age always needs to exist and therefore you have to go and recruit people, or do you then report to the curriculum committee and say, we're losing 2 multi-age teachers, is it time to not have multi-age? And so there's a lot of pieces to this plan that if one of the teachers who, or social workers who has consistently been administrating something that we've identified as a key point to the plan, if that person were to retire, I think we've got a good structure in place where before we just say, oh, well, she's gone, so this part of the plan is going out, we would have to evaluate that and make sure that we're replacing it with something else, or as you said,
or at
the
least
oversight
asking the
piece.
question.
Exactly.
Yeah. We're listing a lot of the key programs that are currently in place, and so that we're contemplating that at least once, if not twice a year, the building administrators would kind of update the committee on the programs within their building, and if there are any material changes from the programs from the prior year, they would let the committee know and maybe explain why they're making the changes that they are, and then the committee could in turn update the full board. So I think, to Kim's point, there's an interesting program called I'm Your Neighbor. It's a welcoming library that offers a collection of books painting the picture of a life of an immigrant and the refugee experience. And it's a program that one person administers on a volunteer basis every other year, and it's a lot of work. And so if that person were to, I guess, if it becomes too much work and they no longer continue it, without this process, we might never know about that. And so this is just a way of making sure that we know what programs are actually taking place, changes that get made and why they're made, and then have a mechanism for keeping the board updated about it. And that's just one section that we've been working on pretty closely, but that's one of the 4.
Exactly.
Happy to take any questions right now, but otherwise just kind of letting everyone know that a lot of work's getting done, but there's going to be a big push needed to get this completed this year.
Jared, I just had a question. So you said that it's been an inclusive process of who's been contributing to it. Does that mean that you've also been bringing in other student groups or teachers or administrators into this, particularly, like I'm thinking like, well, student government, Gay Straight Alliance, so we're making sure that people who this is directly affecting, that it's in alignment and...
Yeah. Sorry, did you have more? No, it's a fair question. I mean, that's not what I was referring to. I meant, it's a fairly large committee. There's 10 of us. There's been good attendance and good participation, And I guess what I meant is that we make an effort to make sure everybody who's on the committee, feels heard and has a chance to share their feedback. I mean, we have building administrators, social workers, parents, students. So we feel like we're touching on a fair amount. I can't say that we're representing everyone, although I hope there's enough people here who are able to represent enough different interests. And I guess there'll be a process by which the board's able to evaluate whether they feel as though it's covering everyone's interests. But what I meant is that it's not one or two people writing this. It's been a real team process, and when you have 10 people, each of whom have good ideas, it takes more time, but you get a better product. That's all I meant to say. But it's a good question.
Yeah. I would add to that part of coming up with the plan is making sure that, and Jared touched on this, that there is, once the plan is in place, that those students have that, that's built in to the equity committee, is constantly hearing from those students. So as of right now, we haven't invited anybody in, but that's because we're just still making sure that we have the framework. And then as it stands right now, part of the plan is that would have to happen, that those groups would have to be invited in to talk about things. So it's not so much what are we offering our gay students, what are we offering our students of color. It's putting together the plan so that those groups can then come to the equity committee and report on the climate at the school and what they might need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think just so if it's something that the board's going to be approving, I want to make sure that what we're approving is something that isn't, causing any unintended consequences.
Sure.
And I actually picked up on a couple similar notes and questions that Anne had, because Jared, you did mention that everyone's been really engaged, which is awesome, but you're specifically talking about the 10 members of the committee, and we have one student rep, it's Avery, I think, is on the equity committee. So one student is part of that, and there aren't any teachers on that committee, right?
Yeah, that is true. I would say that, one recommendation that a member made was, for example, that the plan should be reviewed annually, for best practices, with any recommended updates to be presented to the full board. So it's meant to be it's meant to be a mechanism, again, to hear what is happening within the school system that's related to the goals of policy ACA, make sure that the committee is aware of them and is reporting them to the board, and that there's a mechanism in place for keeping the plan up to date over time and making sure it conforms to best practices. We've compared it against a number of other plans from surrounding school districts. I can tell you, I think there's more meat on the bones, and there's a lot of good thought that's gone into it. Will it be perfect? Probably not, but there'll be some good mechanisms in place to make sure it can be updated as appropriate. Yeah, thank you.
I think it's fair to say the plan is, because I've been on the committee as well, the plan is a way to get more diverse voices and representation in our district and to hear from others, and not just, it's not just around policies and people who are involved in policy making or administrative making or whatever, but to get, the point of the plan is to get more people involved. That's the point of the plan. And actually, we've even talked about things like there's a new DEI committee, diversity, equity, inclusion at the high school this year that is involving staff and students. That has come up, and that's part of this. Where are we looking in our district? One of those members is on the committee. That's a mechanism, right? And the person who started that, which is one of our administrators, actually is on the committee. But I think it's more, the plan is about how do we get more broad representation and get more voice. That's the plan, and that's not the work. The plan is just the scaffolding. It is hard to explain. So.
Can't wait to see it.
I love a good framework and policy, so I'm all for it.
Okay, anything else for equity before we move on? Okay, Tommy, student reports, please.
So it's been a while since I've done a student report. But yeah, no, a lot has happened. I feel like kind of in the sense of just spring beginning, the spring sports have started, April break just ended, and was a really nice opportunity for a lot of students to either get out on the sports field or just take a break from school in general, and kind of similar to a lot of sentiments that Avery has been saying. There are only 5 days of school left for the students that are taking AP and IB exams, and those are starting next week on Wednesday. So it's really weird to kind of feel the school year kind of start to wind down for some of us. And yeah, it's weird also that my junior year is kind of winding down, but I would say that there's definitely just kind of that last kind of push feeling, but we've still got a lot to go. So yeah.
38 days.
Yeah.
I was told that today.
Questions of Tommy? Okay, thank you, Tommy. All right, moving on. Ad hoc committees. Does anybody have anything?
Wellness committee is meeting tomorrow, and I just know that we've gotten a number of emails throughout this year, or more recently over the past few months, I guess, about nutrition, particularly at MIW. And so I did reach out to Carol MacArthur, who is the chair of that committee, with some of that background information. And Full Potential is offering some grants for schools to partner with local farms. So maybe that's something that we can look into.
That would be awesome.
I don't know if I've said this last committee, but the Parks and Recreation, the survey that we're putting out, they recommended, I don't know if have we done that?
It has not gone out.
They said either do paper copies for the elderly in that community, or at one of their events, they're happy for us to come with a laptop, and I volunteered to come with a laptop to help them fill that out. But she said really the best way to reach that community is by mail.
Yep. Shirley Story King said the same.
Yeah, she said if you really want to reach that demographic, and with the survey, it would be by mail. So that's something they could, but they don't have emails. They don't check their emails like we all do every day. They're not, it's not as user-friendly as the survey would be. So that's just something that I wanted to put out there that she had mentioned that would be beneficial for that group. And I don't know if we can accomplish it or not, but, and she actually did also say at the voting, when they come to vote, which was your suggestion a while ago, at the referendum.
Yeah.
Or I mean, not referendum, when we go to vote in June, if we had someone there with paper copies that you could put in and fill out or give it to them and collect later. So that's just from that side. I couldn't remember if I had mentioned it or not.
Yep. Yeah, at the joint meeting, she seemed to mention a group of people that were 50 to 100 people, where they actually had that list that they could force out in paper. And then also Allison mentioned, doing a postcard to everybody, like with a QR code or whatever. And Tom's got a rock solid way to manage all of that.
Didn't they also offer service then?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, that came up too at the joint meeting.
To get their input. Yeah.
I mean, the postcard's intriguing to me because it would be a lower cost option, and you could direct people to the link, either with a link or a QR code, but then say if you want a paper copy, you can go by town hall. I think
it was
mailing paper copies of a survey to everybody would just end up being really expensive.
She said we could give her the paper copies, but the logistical part that I didn't, because I know you're managing it, of how to get that information into
the data entry part of it. Yeah.
So
you might want to find some cheap labor.
Student project.
Yeah.
So that's what I was like, if we have like 200, 300, 500 papers, who's going to get that data so you can give us our nice graphs and charts and results.
That is an open question.
Okay.
Yeah. And a nice problem to have if
Yeah.
we have that many
Yeah,
paper
and if it's
copies.
and I figured we could do it with an ID, so it's not duplicate residents and duplicate entries, that we'd have an ID associated with everyone that goes in, either online or had to manually enter.
Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be a way that we're going to be able to get around that, because
Okay.
we do need it to be anonymous.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're bound to have some people who fill it out online, and then if we are doing paper surveys at the ballots or something like that, then they've forgotten that they've filled it out.
Well, I'm glad I remembered.
Thank you.
9 of us for data entry. Same.
I like the way you think.
Give me a stack. I can do it.
Though I like the idea of like a special student project for like one of the like math, stats, like how we can wrap this in as a learning opportunity in the classroom, like if that's possible.
We better hurry
It might
up
not
if
be
there's
possible,
38
but
days, right?
Let's say senior project, but those have all been, they've all been approved.
But I mean, if we can't for this, like, moving forward for like anything else like this, like to like that just be interesting.
Okay, others for ad hoc? Okay, so with the new school, how many official RFP submissions do we have?
I want to say there was 4.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
It just remained at
4 or 5. We'll have to check the exact number. I have to say, we had somebody call. We actually had 2 people call last week. One had called me the week before. I returned the call. Person called back. We're trying to still get in touch with them. They were interested. So there might be one
I
more.
tried another
And
today,
even though it was a deadline, they did make it before the deadline in terms of asking questions. So we're trying to talk to them about it.
So now Tyler's whittling that down, or? Yeah.
Yeah, Tyler's actually talked about one of the properties that we might want to look at.
Okay. All right, so we'll discuss that in facilities at some point?
Yes.
Next week.
Maybe next week. We can have a little
Maybe next week.
preliminary discussion on this. Yeah.
And will that help? I was just then thinking about the survey. I think one of the big next steps is to really talk about the timeline and when it should come out, and having this hanging over us a little bit if there really is another option or not, and that being one of the sort of triggers for launching this.
Yeah.
I would suggest that for the facilities meeting, if possible, we could get Tyler Barter to come to the meeting.
Yep.
Whether in person or whatnot, but so he can brief the committee.
Yeah, and I'll give him a call too, and just have him get a summary of those properties and the pluses and minuses.
Okay. Very good. Anything else for ad hoc? Okay, moving on to communications. Anything?
Yes. Can we address the forecaster article publicly?
Please, yes. Go
Okay.
for it. If you think you have all the data, absolutely.
Yeah, so have you heard from the journalist yet?
Yep, I did talk with the writer today. We had a meeting. We had a phone meeting, and I walked through where the budget's at right now and the summary of the budget. She said she is writing another article this week, and it was based on the summary presentation tonight. So all that information will be updated in this week's forecaster.
Okay.
That's what I understand from our conversation, and I did spend some time going through that and answering questions.
Good.
So I feel like it will be okay.
Okay.
That's my take on it. I think some of it was just the iterative process of the budget. The 4.6% in Cumberland was from the initial, obviously, presentation, and things have evolved. And the whole process around the budget, I also kind of worked on that with the reporter and explained that things do move and shift, and we're at a different place than we were in mid-March and stuff like that. So it was just part of the whole budget process that we go through, and that things change. And this particular meeting is really the final numbers before the board makes a decision on the budget. So anyway, my understanding is that there will be another article, and it'll be an updated article on the SAD budget this week, from what I understand.
Okay.
I appreciate you pointing it out.
Yes.
Staying on top of the accuracy. I certainly appreciate any frustration there.
Yeah. Jeff, did the journalist indicate, however, that she's going to note corrections or note, not just put new information out there, but point out, because, you know, people read that
The 2 million.
misinformation and they won't know that it was wrong unless she says something explicit.
Yeah. One thing I've learned over the years is that I can never tell a journalist what to do.
I know, but I'm just thinking, did you
'Cause
suggest
it's their role.
that it would be
I
good
did.
to? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. That's
Yeah.
all I'll ask.
And I think the article, I mean, and obviously with the budget process, the newspaper writes several articles. And so this one will be the most updated one, and hopefully we'll have the numbers that we're working off of tonight for the budget as it evolves.
Did the journalist call you before the previous article?
No, did email. The journalist did email me a couple of questions, but I think there were some other questions that I could have answered too, prior to. So I've certainly offered that in the past, and I'm offering it again. But anyway, we had a great conversation, and I think all the information about our status on the budget is well known at this point. So, but it isn't. I mean, I'm not trying to lessen the impact of the importance of getting the right information out, but I want to make sure that the forecaster also knows that. I mean, it has their role, right, is to provide the information, and so all I can do is provide the information to the forecaster, and they do what they are with it. I always want to be a resource, and that's what I've always offered, whether it's forecast or the Press Herald. And as we develop relationships, obviously, with journalists, that's what I'm always offering. We always do. So I feel good about that.
Everybody read the updated version, please.
There will be an updated version, is
Yes.
my understanding.
Correct.
And that
Updated
updated version will hopefully have all of the information. And I think, in this community, like every community, people get information from different sources. And the forecaster is a big source. Obviously, it's an important source. And so our updated budget information, obviously, we want that out there.
Accurately.
Right.
That would be good.
Yes, we want the most updated and accurate information anywhere we put information out.
Yeah.
Whether it's our website, whether it's the forecaster, Press Herald, wherever it is.
You're being very kind. All right. Anything else for communications? Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn for number 12?
Yes.
So moved.
I think that was a motion from Vanessa. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Christina. All in favor?
I was afraid you had another question.
Unanimous.
Who
Motion
was the
carries.
second on that?